Chapter 1657. Setting up a new world wasn't a difficult task. Even if he couldn't find a world he liked, he could just create one himself. He had spent so much effort to move more than 90% of the living beings in this world out, so he didn't mind spending 1 or 2 hours to carefully create a new world. This wasn't a difficult task. It really wasn't a difficult task. What was difficult was that they did not know where to place the new world. Looking at the current environment of the Order Void, it was really terrible. These guys from the Cloud Continent were probably the top 5 in terms of combat power in the entire Order Void. Their understanding and use of the laws, order, and void were much worse than other life forms of the same level. Fortunately, they did not have any problems adapting to the laws of the void. They did not have to go through a turbulence in the laws of the void. However, it would take a long time for them to become normal life forms of this level. If Hui was the one who planned the rest of the journey, he would first find a very safe nest for a short period of time. After that, he would immediately seal himself up for thousands of years and not come out until the time was right. Currently, they knew 80 to 90% of the Order Void's movements. They did not know about the remaining 10% and did not have the time to know about it. There is only one word to describe it, and everyone would understand it: gray. Of course, it wasn't to the extent that Maple said. The underworld was a fence-sitter at the end of the God's Age and fought with both sides. At most, they were taking advantage of the chaos and the void of order to secretly stir up trouble. It was only because no one had the time to deal with these thieving bastards that they were able to do so well. If someone accidentally touched this new world, it was guaranteed that it would be another disaster. This was very unfair to the life forms of the Cloud Continent who had just escaped with their lives. It could be seen from the silence in the void of order. This time, they had slipped out for such a long period of time, and yet the underworld didn't make a single move. They were really lucky, and luck was something that couldn't be replicated. No one could guarantee that the next time they slipped out, they wouldn't meet with any life-threatening trouble. Just by mobilizing a small portion of their forces, just like this time, they could send out a group of people. What if the underworld just happened to attack at this time? What if they took longer than the 2 months they spent cooped up in the Black Nest? Within these 100 days, the appearance of the world of order would change drastically. That would really be, after leaving the world for a period of time, even if the void was in ruins, it wouldn't be surprising. After thinking about it, they still threw the new Cloud Continent, the new space formed by the integration of hundreds of spaces, into a space in the God's world. There was no good place to put them in the Order Void. Although the God's world could be considered as the center of the storm, at least it was still relatively safe for now. Including the many spaces in the God's world, Maple had already thrown a few worlds into it. It was not a big problem to add one more. Anyway, those spaces could evolve into a proper world. At night, they could even take a look at the night sky of the God's world and see what the real starry sky looked like. Put them in your world. When Hui told Jihan Xiao and the rest about this, they had already brought everyone to the God's world. By the time the latter reacted, everyone could almost feel the aura of the God's world. Hui and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. This was the feeling of returning home. They had not seen each other for more than 100 million years. Unfortunately, they could only take a look from the outside. Later on, they would be directly transported to the space inside the God's world without even entering the house. They quickly took 2 breaths of the God's world's air and took it as a trip around home. When they returned to the Void frontline, they could still boast to their family. We're just following the arrangements here, so we don't have much to say. Seeing this group of people from the God's world showing some longing and nostalgia, Ji Hanxiao's gaze wavered slightly. That's your world, right? Why did you suddenly let a group of outsiders? It's fine. Our world has countless overlapping spaces, and they're all spaces that can be evolved. Putting you guys, there will be a companion world for the God's world. Hui waved his hand dismissively. Hui waved his hand and said carelessly, "Of course, you guys won't be able to go to the celestial realm in the beginning. I don't want to boast, but our world is one of the best in the world of order. Although all the elite combat forces have been sent out, there are still quite a number of people who stay at home. Usually, when they have nothing to do, they will patrol their own gardens and get rid of a few foreign pests. You guys have just arrived in the outside world, and there are many things that you haven't adapted to. Just talking about your own strength is far from the normal level. If you go to the celestial realm rashly, there will be a few sensitive guys who see you. Jihan Xiao and the rest wipe the cold sweat off their foreheads. Well, you don't have to worry about this. We'll inform the people who should know about the arrangements we left behind in the God's world. However, we're mainly worried that you guys will be oversensitive. That's what I mean. So you guys won't be able to go to the God's world in the beginning. After some time, the door here will open automatically. Anyway, there's a lot of visitors coming to the God's world now. How long is this period of time? Jihan Xiao asked weakly. At least 10 million years, Hui said as he counted. Hui counted with his fingers and said, including your reconstruction, adapting to the new rules, adapting to the order, and making minor adjustments to the influence of the divine realm's power, the time taken should be stuck at the 10 million year mark. Of course, it's hard to say whether it's 10 million years or tens of millions of years. It depends on you. 10 million years. It's not considered very long. Jihan Xiao took a deep breath and nodded to express his understanding. Some of them could not help but smile bitterly. Although it was not long, it was still a long time. After 10 million years, the new cloud continent would probably have completely changed. Time passes very quickly in the void. It's always gone by when you're not paying attention. Hui patted Jihan Xiao's shoulder and grinned. Also, you guys have neighbors who are also waiting for time. Their desires are lower than yours, and the rules they follow before are not the same as the Void's rules now. They took a longer time to adjust. It's about time for them to come out. But we don't have time to watch. Hui let out a long sigh and turned to look at Jihan Xiao and the others who were a little confused. He waved his hand. All right, let's not talk about that first. You guys don't have time to care about other things now. Tidy up your own world first. The creation in the life-bound space was like a soap bubble that exploded with a flash of light. Golden flowing light filled the entire space and kept expanding. It weaved complete rules, tidied up space, time, and order, and then turned all of them into a semi-solidified state. It created a star field and stars. The sea of stars rotated and millions of stars shone brightly, lighting up the dark star field and dyeing it with the brilliant brilliance of the starry sky. The above was the simplified and quick version of the creation of the God Realm's life-bound space. However, it was no different from a normal world. It even had some rules from the God Realm, making the rules of this world stronger. At this moment, it did not matter whether it was a quick version or a refined version. Anyway, it was not that bad. If they did not like it, they could just make another one. However, looking at Jihan Xiao and the others, they probably did not need it. The world under the distant blue sky. Oh, that's right, he also created a world that looked almost the same as the cloud continent, but it was slightly enlarged by a few times. It was all directly engraved from laws. When he was dealing with the structural laws of the cloud continent, he took a part of it out and engraved its complete appearance. But this time, there's no longer that damned chaos energy, the origin energy that was similarly creeping in the dark, and there were no origin relics or other shitty things related to the origin. It was a clean, complete, and free from any interference world. The blue sky, clear sunlight, and a few stars that were almost cut off by the sunlight during the day. This was a completely different sky from their world. This was a world that was very similar to the world they were familiar with. It made Jihan Xiao and the others feel a faint sense of familiarity when they stepped on this land, just like how they felt just now. That's right, it was the feeling of returning home. The sky seems a little different. Jihan Xiao could not help but say. He remembered that the cloud continent sky did not have those few stars that could be seen during the day. Even the sunlight felt different. It's a new world after all. Well, it's a new world after all, so it's normal for the sky to be different. The only similarity you have is this new continent that has been enlarged several times. Oh, by the way, the space of this new continent has not completely solidified. If you want to release the space and merge it with the space of the present world, now is a very good time. As for the sky, you don't have to pay too much attention to it, but Hui crossed his arms and grinned. The starry sky you saw before was fake. What you see now is the real sky. At night, You will see real stars that you have never seen before, so look forward to it. Look forward to it. Huey's expression changed. He nodded and muttered to himself. That's what Feng said. The rest of the matter was very simple. First, they had to find a place to release the space. However, only the space that originally belonged to the Cloud Continent would be released. The other spaces that originated from the lower continent, as well as the lives there, would be placed in that large space for the time being. When the time came, they would slowly be released. It's still because of that familiar feeling. That's why I didn't plan to throw everyone here at once. I originally wanted to merge the integrated space into this new Cloud Continent in one go, but it doesn't seem to be a good idea. Ji Hanshao said to Hui, there are differences between the lower continent and the Cloud Continent. Right now, the reconstructed land in the new space already has a feeling that they're familiar with. There might be people over there. It's only been a month, and they've already taken root? Hui smiled bitterly and scratched his head, but it's okay. They'll move out in the future anyway. For ordinary life forms, it won't take long, when they realize that the situation here is better than the other side. Ji Hanshao spread his hands. Then, as usual, after they were done exploring the new world, they would use all sorts of excuses to stay in the new world and refuse to leave. In fact, they didn't spend much time exploring the Cloud Continent the previous 2 times, so they didn't know much about the local things. Now that they had the time to explore the new world, all that was left was a city that was being rebuilt but was still intact. Specialty products? Forget it, they could only eat dust here. Of course, there was a reason for them to stay here. This was a serious excuse for themselves. Feng seemed to know a small group of people in the Cloud Continent. They were very lucky to have escaped one disaster after another. At this moment, they were still alive and kicking. After settling down, they found their way here. They were chatting with Jing Yuanji and were preparing to say goodbye to the ball in her hand. In the blink of an eye, they were basically girls who came to say goodbye. We could not help but applaud in his heart. Good fellow, the same sex attracts. How long had it been since another group of people came to say goodbye? It seems that you all have been well these days. I was worried for a while. Jing Yuanji was holding a ball of light and talking to a beautiful girl in a green close-fitting robe. The latter was staring at the ball of light in Jing Yuanji's hand. Her complexion was indeed quite good, compared to the first time when she was so pale that it seemed as if her soul would scatter at any moment. Without any fighting spirit or vitality, and with the fire of her soul like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any moment. Her complexion was now rosy, her hair was soft and smooth, and her eyes were shining. She was no longer dull and lifeless. Compared to the first time they met, when she looked as if she was about to die, she was now clearly alive. Lei Hua saw her senior sister in a daze and quickly poked her back. She then smiled faintly and looked up. I was taught a lesson. The little note left by the senior. It's mainly because I saw that scene later and experienced what happened here. I suddenly felt that it's a very cowardly escape behavior to be trapped in the past and not want to come out. Jing Yuanji and Lei Hua stared at her in surprise. What little note? The girl's words were erratic, and it was obvious that something was wrong. Although the earth-shattering scene at the end was shocking, and it was indeed enough to wake a muddle-headed person up, Jing Yuanji felt that that was definitely not the main point. The main point must be that little note. It was the little note that Lord Feng left behind that affected her. But what exactly was written on that note that could make a girl whose whole world had faded into meaningless ashes come back to life? No, nothing. Lei Qing's hands gently touched each other. Her pretty face blushed, but she quickly covered it up. Seeing their suspicious eyes, she quickly changed the topic. So, you're leaving? There are a lot of things to deal with and avoid. We can't stay for long. Jing Yuanji sighed. She tilted her head and looked at Master Hui, who was chatting with Ji Hanshao and the others. He kept finding excuses to stall for time and gave them time to say goodbye. She could not help but shake her head. Oh! Lei Qing lowered her head in disappointment. After a moment, she smiled sweetly. Well, although I don't know what you're busy with, I wish you all the best in advance. Jing Yuanji smiled and nodded. Thank you for your kind words. Don't worry, there are still many opportunities in the void. There will be times when we can meet again. Master Feng said that if the parting and meeting here are allowed, the rest is only a matter of time. As long as we're still alive, we don't have to worry about not seeing each other again. They had survived all the disasters this time. As long as they did not encounter the most critical moment, they could also survive the rest. Let's not talk about that. How's your situation now? Although this place is similar to the Cloud Continent, there are still many differences. Even the rules are not the same. Can you still adapt? They were surrounded by busy figures. Half of them were people released from Ji Hanxiao's space. They were neatly guiding them to carry out all kinds of necessary activities in this space that had just merged with the land of the present world. Building houses, building houses, building houses with all their might. If they wanted to rebuild, they had to build houses first. The raw materials were all local, so it was not a big problem. Jing Yuanji asked Lei Qing and the others as they walked aimlessly within 100 meters of the place in this slightly noisy and orderly environment. It doesn't take too much time to adapt to the rules, even for ordinary people. When we first heard that we had come to a new world, everyone was very worried. However, the reality seems to be much better than we expected. Lei Qing gently stroked her long hair beside her ear and said softly, "The terrain here is very similar. It has more abundant energy than the world we used to live in. It has a better environment. At present, we haven't found any negative effects. Everyone didn't feel disappointed because their home was destroyed and they came to a new world. They are all very strong in rebuilding. There are many high-level beings helping, so there shouldn't be too much of a problem." Lei Hua couldn't help but mutter, "Although I feel that everyone is just suppressing their pain in the bottom of their hearts, I have heard many people muttering about Cloud Continent and their homelands. However, they're all whispering, and no one is causing trouble. That can't be helped. This is the void in reality. Occasionally, it will be cruel. Occasionally, it will make you feel very cold. Occasionally, it will make you feel lucky. However, this is only a part of its nature." Jing Yuanji sighed softly. The void simply existed. Because it was realistic enough, the emotions played on this huge stage were absolutely sufficient. There would not be a sudden lack of any kind. There were joys, sorrows, sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy. However, it was only a part of life. In this case, we only need to pay attention to the spiritual and psychological problems of ordinary beings. As for those who have enough realms, we don't need to pay much attention to them. Everyone is used to a wandering life. They will adjust themselves after being disappointed for a while. Jing Yuanji looked into the distance. Those who could reach her realm probably did not come out purely from staying at home. Therefore, she did not need to pay too much attention to these people. They could adjust themselves on their own. What she needed to worry about was the larger number of ordinary beings. However, we don't need to worry too much. She suddenly stopped and looked to the side. Lei Qing and the rest looked over as well. Hui Zheng was chatting with Ji Hanxiao and the rest about the matters of this world and the void. They understood what she meant. The rulers were all here, so they didn't have to worry about these things. Lei Qing's eyes flickered. She stared at the light ball in her arms and whispered, "Senior, what's his situation now?" Jing Yuanji's expression stiffened slightly. Her expression became a little strange. She could not tell what the situation was. After thinking for a long time, she still felt that this was the only sentence that could make people feel more at ease. "Don't worry. He's sleeping very quietly." Is she trying to say peaceful? He should have passed away peacefully. When is the big idiot going to wake up? There's no sound from Sister's side. Did the two of them fall asleep together? I don't know. I'm a little worried. In her spiritual world, CU and the other girls started to make a ruckus because of her words, which made Jing Yuanji smile bitterly. When Feng Darren brought this group of girls with him, did they also make a ruckus like this? Lei Qing stared at the light ball for a while. She saw that it seemed to tremble inadvertently. She plucked up her courage and bent down. She stretched out her slender finger towards the light ball and gently poked it. Buzz! The ball of light suddenly trembled, and a brilliant light surged on its surface. Lei Qing let out a small cry of surprise. Seeing Jing Yuanji and Lei Hua's strange gazes, her beautiful face instantly turned slightly red. She turned around and trotted away with Feng Yu and Lei Dian. The surrounding people were at a loss for what to do. Lei Hua could not help but mutter Senior's sister's gaze. Senior, did she fall in the river? Jing Yuanji's pretty face was full of smiles. She chuckled a few times. It's already so obvious. Be bold and remove the word no. That girl fell in, but I don't know. She lowered her head and caressed the pure white light ball. She could not help but smile bitterly. I don't know when it happened. Lei Hua scratched her head. Her instincts told her that it must be related to the little note that her senior sister mentioned. However, since that thing was the core, her senior sister would definitely not let them know. Now they were stuck in an endless loop. Jing Yuanji and Lei Hua looked at each other and sighed. They still did not know what was written on the note that day. It could actually awaken the desire to live in a girl who had lost hope. Among the few people who came later, Jing Yuanji only knew the little black snake. She did not know the two young boys and the little girl. However, this was not a problem. They were mainly here to bid farewell to Master Feng. She could just be the light blue human background. Phew, you pretty much told me everything you know. On the other side, Hui put his hands on his hips and let out a long sigh of relief. He waved his hand at Jihan Xiao and the others who were confused. The matters of the void are almost done. You guys don't have to care about it now. Slowly go through your recovery period. It's not too late to talk about the matters of the void later. All right. Guys, pack up. It's time. We have to go. Following the Lord Guardian's shout, the soldiers of the heavenly realm pulled their backs out of the wall reluctantly. They took a deep breath, and their expressions were slightly serious. It was time for them to return to the battlefield that belonged to them. Feng's situation. It's still the same. Hui came to Jing Yuanji's side and looked at the light ball in her hands. He patted his head with a slight headache. Feng had not shown any signs of waking up. The progress of his body reconstruction was still at 0. He did not know whether that guy was in trouble or just dawdling. How many days has it been? Min could not help but frown. It's in a few days. It seems that the complete liberation last time hurt him more than he and I thought. Hui scratched his head. Forget it. Let's talk about it when we return to the front line of the void. The departure was only for a moment. The light of teleportation flashed, and the 50 figures in front of them disappeared. Jihan Xiao and the others bowed in the direction where the light disappeared. Then, they turned around and threw themselves into the rebuilt Yunduan continent. Just as they had a world to conquer, they also had their own matters to deal with. It had been like this since the beginning. This was how the void was. Chapter 1658. The front line of the void was only a short distance away from the void blockade that encompassed the known and observed order void. As a line of defense, the front line itself was too weak. Once the void blockade crumbled, the front line would not last for long. However, the front line itself was not something that existed as an energy barrier. It was just a front that gathered most of the order void's power. It was a front that could provide an endless supply of order power, allowing the warriors of order to recover their strength. The war that lasted for 100 million years was because the front line of the void had many arrangements that could sustain order power. Only a few people in the void front line knew that the most powerful group guarding this line of defense had gone out for a period of time. The underworld did not know either. If they knew that Hui had returned now, they would only see a line of defense that was constantly retreating. That was lucky. Next time, it was better not to have a group activity if there was nothing important. After hurriedly circling the gates of the divine realm, the group returned to the void front line without even getting close to the door. However, they did not immediately split up and return to where they were supposed to be guarding. They still had a side effect and the most serious matter to deal with. However, the feeling of returning from an expedition was really dull. There was no sense of peace after a big news event. We thought about it carefully and felt that it was because they could not calm down. In the silent void, there was only a slight change in the artificial sun and moon alternating in many cities of the void that were enclosed by the defensive line. Other than that, there was only loneliness and boredom. This was the life of a proper frontier warrior. Lord Hui, Lord Feng, you're back. I Ching had been waiting on the walls of the void front line ever since he sensed the auras of the two lords reappearing through the soul transmission. Now that he sensed a large amount of familiar auras approaching, he hurriedly went forward and was stunned when he saw Lord Huey's solemn expression. His welcoming tone quickly faded, replaced by a serious one. Lord Huey, what happened? Just a special situation. It's not a big problem. Don't cause a commotion. Hui whispered in the soul transmission. He led a group of people and stopped on the city wall. He turned around and instructed everyone to temporarily seal off the void city with the power of order. Then he said that, the group of people that I asked you to bring back last time, where are they now? I have something to discuss with them. If you're talking about them, they were brought back to rest for a few days and then scattered to the front lines according to their own wishes. As for Big Brother Jingyan and the others, they just happen to be here. As I Ching spoke, a blurry figure appeared in the space beside him with a whoosh, causing him to be startled. He shrugged at Lord Hui and said, Look, he's here. Yo, you guys really went out for a long time this time. I thought you guys encountered some kind of... where is he? Jing Yun, who was still dressed in a pale white robe, turned from a shadow into a physical body. She chuckled softly, and the moment she landed, she saw the guardian of the God Realm, whom she had only met once. Then, the figure of the inheritor of the origin disappeared. She looked at everyone curiously. Where's the little one? Where did the little guy who inherited the power of the heavenly god of origin go? Oh well. Hui laughed dryly and turned to look at Jing Yuanji. The latter stepped forward and held the ball of light in her hand, slightly forward without saying a word. Jing Yun frowned and stared at the pure white ball of light. She could vaguely see the violent energy surging within it. Her eyes widened at once, and she pointed at the ball of light in astonishment. Seeing that Hui and the others were a little solemn but not sad, she understood a little and nodded gently. Come to our side first. Outside of the void city, an enormous temple stood in the void, perhaps only 2,000 or 3,000 meters away. The sacred air that overflowed from the temple seemed to be mixed with ancient chants, as if the light prayers of countless creatures were engraved in the void and echoed around as the temple appeared. They were very familiar with the majestic and vast power radiance, not to mention that they had rolled a few hundred times in the storm of that power not long ago. There was an individual beside them whose body was overflowing with that power. Is that the Shrine of Origin? The Shrine of Origin that was left as a node in the void? We found some information related to the huge sacred temple in front of him from some fragmented memory images and blurted out. So you know about it. Jing Yun was a little surprised, but thinking about his identity, she became curious and went into a state of contemplation. The guardians of the divine realm know about it. Is it because of part of the power granted by this divine title? That world holds a lot of information fragments, and as long as you touch it, you would know a lot of things buried by time to a certain extent, but not everyone could touch it at will. It seems that the second divine title gives you considerable power in this aspect, and even allows you to mobilize the power of the divine realm itself. Let's skip that question for now. In the period when you were not around, we tried to find the lost Shrine of Origin in the Void of Order. We were lucky to find a part of the heavily damaged node shrine hidden in the void. We did our best to repair it, but almost no power of the heavenly god of origin was left. We were going to wait for you to come back and try to repair it more or less, but we did not expect this to happen. So what kind of trouble did you run into? Hui smiled bitterly, organized his words, and threw everything that happened in the Cloud Continent, whether it was the origin or the chaos, into Jing Yun's mind. After the latter received all the information, he was instantly stunned, really stunned. We saw him widen his eyes and turned into a gray stone statue in the void and did not move for a long time. He could not help but smile bitterly. This kind of information was too much of an impact for all life forms. Jing Yun only recovered after a few minutes, and when she saw him again, he was sweating. You were forced by the void to target you, right? How could you run into so many things at once? We turned his face away. I'm sorry, but you're right. There are two in front of you right now. They're both forced by the great void will. The level of that ball of light is higher than his. Basically, this kind of thing is caused by him. The heavenly god of origins. Little brother attracted the legacy of origins because he was the chosen successor of the heavenly gods of origins. That's easy to understand. Jing Yin had a puzzled expression on her face. But why is it related to the chaos? And you ran into the most dangerous thing in the void, the primordial chaos of the greater Yuan realm, a group of concept aggregates. This is not really a big deal. As he spoke, he rubbed his forehead vigorously. If you think about it, it's already a great thing that you guys were able to escape from there safely. It's probably what you said, the result of it being interested in you guys, right? Hui smiled bitterly and tried to put on a straight face. After a while, he still laughed bitterly and gave up struggling. The concept aggregates you're talking about, are you referring to the Chaos Fiend Shadow? What are they? Chaos Fiend Shadow. Well, it's not a bad name. At that time, we were used to calling them Chaos Aggregates, Chaos Concept Bodies. This is the most profound thing that we have left after the tide of chaos. Along with this knowledge, there seems to be unforgettable hatred and irreconcilable enmity. It is a very natural enmity, the kind that will immediately appear in the heart when you mention it. If they appeared in front of us directly, we would have rushed at them with our swords, even though we were no match for them. When the greater Yuan realm was born, the already formed newborn space had already completed the polarization, order and chaos. The two equally divided the entire newborn space. 10 billion words omitted in the middle. Jing Yin suddenly raised his hand and said, "The main thing is that we can't remember more than the beginning." Everyone was speechless. They had all forgotten that this guy's brain was muddled by the tide of chaos, and he could not remember much. It was already very difficult for him to say the beginning. The most important thing is that they, in them, the god of origin, the chaos concept bodies, one represents the purest order, the other represents the purest chaos. You can think of them as the original products that were born with the birth of the greater Yuan realm, but later on, these products were all out of the greater Yuan realm's control. After all, the greater Yuan realm itself does not have any consciousness, nor does it have any control. It probably does not even know what it will give birth to and what will happen in this world because of the arrival of these products. Hui felt a little strange as he listened. Wait a minute. You are saying that the god of origin and the chaos fiend shadow were born directly from the void? Doesn't that mean they're actually the life of the origin? No, it's not as simple and pure as you think. Jingyan shook her head. The moment when the great origin realm was born, I'm referring to the earliest moment before the phenomenon and concept of the void and nothingness appeared. The god of origin and the others, as well as the chaos fiend shadow that you speak of, were all born at that time. They were born in that primordial space earlier than all the other worlds. They were truly the earliest products of the great origin realm. Jingyan suddenly paused strangely, and everyone was stunned. They saw that he suddenly took out a book from his chest and flipped through 2 pages. A moment later, he closed the book with a snap and nodded to show his confirmation. He even showed the cover of the book to everyone. This excerpt is from The Things About the God of Origin and the Birth of the Greater Yuan Realm. Everyone. He was actually flipping through the book. This matter was confirmed by the God of Origin and the others themselves. Before they confirmed it, there were people who investigated it out of curiosity, so they came up with countless answers. Until one day, a visitor accidentally talked to one of the God of Origin about this matter. Only then did they give this clear answer. After that, there was only this answer. Jingyan waved his hand nonchalantly. This is also the main reason why the big guys, all the beings of order, would see the God of Origin and the others as the representatives of order and the conceptual embodiment of order. He paused for a moment. It is also because of this that they are naturally regarded as the conceptual embodiment of chaos. There is no way to verify the truth, but it should not be too far off. After all, they are all products of the beginning of the greater Yuan realm, and when I learned of their existence, it was already something that happened quite a long time later. As for more things, I should have known more, but unfortunately, just like this book, Many things have dissipated with the tide of chaos. He opened the book in his hand and flipped through the pages. Hui and the others watched as the pages kept jumping, flashing by a lot of blank pages. Even if there were pages with content, 1/6 to 1/2 of the area was blank or chaotic. There were not many pages with intact content. We could not help but sigh. The tide of chaos had affected too many things. Perhaps this was also one of the main reasons why the previous era disappeared very cleanly. When this tide rushed over, not many things could be spared. The products of the beginning of the Greater Yuan realm? In that case, what were they? Some kind of will of the Greater Yuan realm? Conceptual embodiments of order? Or, this was very complicated, and there were many guesses. The standard answer was already gone, and the rest could only be guessed blindly. However, even such existences could disappear, and it sounded quite unbelievable. He was more willing to believe that they had just left for a while, and would return one day to return to the Order Void. If they could come back to life, why couldn't they do the same? Well, this was just his wishful thinking. Who knew what the reality was like? As for what the heavenly God of origin is, well, I think this question will not come to a conclusion. After all, there are all kinds of people. Currently no one, at that time, no one dared to ask them what they are. That's what I mean. Jing Yun said with a dry laugh. Hui and the others could not help but smile bitterly. In theory, there should not be anyone who dared to point at the heavenly God of Origin's nose and ask, "What the hell are you?" That's what it meant. The person who said it might be gone in the next second. It was too dangerous. TCH, it's useless to keep talking about this question. They could be any concept of order, or just they are them. It's just a personal opinion. Compared to this, let's quickly look at the little brother situation. Jing Yun found a place in the Temple of Origin where the origin energy was denser and placed the ball of light that Yun Nuoxing had transformed into. She squatted down and poked at the ball of light. She kept muttering to herself. Her gradually serious expression made Hui and the others nervous. Here, he was the one who knew the most about the heavenly gods of origin. Other than Maple, who was lying there, there should be no one who knew more about this than him. Well, I can't tell what's going on with this situation. After a while, Jing Yun scratched her head and stood up. She looked at the nervous eyes of the others and smiled bitterly. I have seen the inheritors of the heavenly God of origin, but none of them had a special situation like this little brother. It's probably because the current time period is too special that it created this extremely special inheritor. I can't tell what's going on with this situation. Hui was a little anxious when he heard that. Tell me what's going on with him first. Well, if it's like what you said, it should be because he came into contact with too many primordial relics and used too much of the primordial's power that shouldn't be used. Jing Yun continued to scratch her head. But the current situation doesn't look like a serious situation, like a backlash. The little brother just looks like his situation is still considered good. There's no way for him to condense his soul and body, and the flow of energy is a little strange. By the way, does the little brother have any special characteristics in terms of energy? Special characteristics in terms of energy? We had a headache when this question was brought up all of a sudden. Doesn't special ability count? That's a personal characteristic. The group looked at each other. After a moment of pondering, they started to talk as much as they could about Yin Nuoxing's every time she went on a killing spree. Jing Yin was confused and confused. Everyone had a unique view of the little brother, but each view could not get around one thing. He was a special ability to fight. He had to admit that among the many people in the world of order, there were not many who could fight better than this little brother of the inheritor. Bullshit. Well, he still heard some key points. Amidst the pile of information, he found one or two key points. His expression changed slightly. If that's the case, that phenomenon was caused by the little brother himself. Everyone saw that he seemed to have come to a conclusion and stopped their discussion. They all looked at Jing Yun and saw that he was squatting in front of the light, waving his hand above it, as if he was sensing something. The primordial precepts and the primordial energy are in a state of gradual fusion. At first, I thought that the primordial precepts and the primordial energy were in a state of gradual fusion. At first, I thought that the primordial precepts and the primordial energy were in a state of gradual fusion. He seems to like the fusion of energies. Well, this is no ordinary energy. Fusing the primordial energy and the primordial precepts together, letting them really fuse into the soul or something. But it doesn't look like he's rubbing the primordial energy together. It looks like he's just touching them at the same time for a short period of time, and then I don't know what he's going to do. There's no way to predict what will happen. Is there no way to interfere now? We asked. Jingyan shook her head. That's the primordial energy and the primordial precepts we're talking about. If we touch them recklessly and they determine that our actions are harmful to the little brother, we might be eliminated in the next second. At such a time, we can only let the little brother handle it himself. Since there's nothing weird happening so far, there shouldn't be any problems, probably. Jingyan smiled bitterly and scratched her head. Anyway, let's just leave him in the Temple of Origins for now. This is an intact node temple. The primordial energy and the weak primordial precepts both exist here. It should be able to help a little. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Jingyan looked at everyone and suddenly waved her hand. Let's go. Let's let him slowly brew here. The underworld doesn't seem to be planning to attack anytime soon. Let's use this time to talk about some things about order and chaos. The sudden appearance of their existence on the Cloud Continent makes me feel a little uneasy. If there's a chaos collective behind the underworld that's adding fuel to the fire, this battle will be particularly difficult. We need to find a way to take a look at the chaotic void. While we're at it, we need to touch the abyssal death shroud to see what's going on. We heard that and let out a long sigh. The void of order was never peaceful. Before they could see Maple getting better, something worse was urging them to continue moving forward. They could not stop and could only keep moving forward until they reached the end, no matter which end it was. As everyone quietly left the main temple of the Temple of Origins, some things that were lurking here quietly moved. Jing Yuanji was the last to leave. She turned around because she felt a little movement. Then, she was slightly stunned. She saw billions of stars appearing and gathering little by little. Just as she was about to call out to Lord Hui and the others, the latter and the others had already gone far away. When she turned back again, she found that the main temple was silent again, as if she had just seen another illusion. The origin continent, that garden, at least 10 minutes ago, Yin Nuoxing still remembered that he had been sitting there. When he came to his senses, everything before him was gray and pitch black. This was not his consciousness running off to some strange place again. He knew what was going to happen next. It had happened once in the 139th era. It was when he chose to fuse with the sin of the world, allowing it to fuse with half of his self and become something. It was in this dim space of consciousness, but this time, he did not feel that he had chosen to come to this space because of something. Yes, he did not. He did not remember. He had no such impression and no such memory at all. But he was here. The origin chaos, or did you guys do something? Yin Nuoxing murmured into the empty darkness. Of course, he did not get any response. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh and made a gesture of raising his hand. He could not see anything. He could not even see his fingers when he stretched out his hand. However, in front of him, he seemed to see a faint but very obvious light green light. He thought for a while and lifted his foot to walk towards it. Distance. There was no distance in this space. He only needed to lift his foot, and in an instant, he arrived at the place where the light green light was released. What appeared in front of him was a mirror made of bronze. The light that came from nowhere illuminated his figure, the mirror, and the other figure that was reflected in the mirror, another version of himself, one that looked exactly the same as himself, but had a completely different temperament and aura. Half of the origin energy, half of the annihilation energy, half of the origin precepts, and half of the chaos precepts. The two sides worked together to shape him in the mirror on two different levels. What was reflected in the mirror was the desperate posture that he had displayed in the Cloud Continent. The pure white figure had light flowing out of the energy that flowed out of his body, and this body was dyed in a myriad of colors. His long hair was dyed with all the colors in this world. His azure wings were pitch black, and his eyes were a strange silver black. But that was not all. Countless chains of order and chaos extended out from the darkness behind him. It was as if he was trapped in the darkness here. He lowered his head to look for the chains that did not exist on his body. The mirror moved along with him. His hands went straight through the chains that did not exist on his body, as if it was an illusion. The other self that was pieced together by half of the origin and the other half of the chaos is different from that phantom. It only existed for a moment and then quietly dissipated. The self here exists completely and is sealed in the bottom of my heart. His right hand gently stroked the mirror, overlapping with his own palm in the mirror. Yin Nuoxing faintly smiled at the mirror, and the him in the mirror also smiled back. Bright and beautiful, sacred and inviolable, indescribably evil. It was the darkest and most twisted creation in the world. You intend to stay? Stay in this world? You chose. So it should be like this. It should be as you wish. Of course. Chapter 1659. It was supposed to be the result of an impulsive choice made in desperation. It could not be replicated, and it was not feasible to use it again. Even if he was restored to his peak state and used it again, the success rate was still unknown. The success that day had too many influences. The chaotic energy in the world had stimulated the origin energy. The origin energy, which had come into contact with the origin law, had not completely calmed down from the sudden stimulation. There were also some minor conditions that contributed to the successful use of that time. It was just an act of desperation, a crazy act of a trapped beast. Although he was a little crazy himself, he was even more crazy that time. You want to stay in the world? Your wish, your choice, you and I are here because of it. So, his palm touched the surface of the mirror lightly. The mirror, which had not changed at all, suddenly rippled and spread from the surface of the mirror. He seemed to understand something. His palm exerted a little force, and the ripples on the mirror spread faster and faster. However, his figure in the mirror did not become blurred because of the spreading ripples. Stop it! A slightly anxious voice sounded in the darkness, directly hitting the depths of Yin Nuoxing's consciousness. There was a loud, ringing sound in the voice, as if it was trying to wake him up. Yin Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. He was not affected by the voice and did not respond. He continued to exert strength in his palm. Then, as if he had broken through a certain limit, the ripples on the surface of the mirror disappeared in an instant. His palm sank into the surface of the mirror as if it had sunk into a quagmire. His outstretched hand touched a solid object. With a forceful tug, he pulled that object out of the space of the mirror. Bang! There was a violent sound of energy explosion in the dark space. The place where he and the mirror were suddenly turned into a huge pit. The whole invisible dark space suddenly appeared with faint silver and gray patterns, allowing him to clearly distinguish that this space had collapsed. The scenery around him was being dragged into the depths of the huge abyss, almost turning into a long and narrow enclosed space to cover him. Among the several outsiders' vision overlooking the dark scene, two of them felt stiff. The void was silent for a while. Suddenly, the young man's voice sounded again. He is too reckless, isn't he? So resolute. Why did I call out to him? It's not like he didn't hear me, but he still did it. Three silhouettes formed by white light appeared in the void. The three of them sat at the table in the garden and looked down at the space that had been completely engulfed by darkness. The slightly burly youth looked a little anxious, and the light flashed as if he was anxious. The girl's silhouette shook her head as if she felt a little helpless. What an unyielding character. Wouldn't it have been better if you had just spoken up and dissuaded him? I don't think anyone would really stop if they were suddenly yelled stop on the street. Maybe they would turn around and start running. Look, he didn't even turn his head and plunged into the street. Oh. The young man smiled bitterly and scratched his head. He turned his head to look at the other white figure. She was still calmly sipping her tea without saying a word. He could not help but say, "The person you chose went in head first. Aren't you going to say anything?" She put down her teacup and said calmly, "It's his own choice. There's no need to dissuade him. He knows better than us what he needs and what he needs to do. We don't have to change anything because of that. We just have to watch. Even if that's the case, wouldn't it be too? The last time was a risky move. This time, there's no guarantee that there won't be any accidents. Two powers of order coexisting together. Even with the existence of the primal chaos, such a move is still a little too crazy. Maybe, she said without saying anything. She calmly sipped her tea. The two of them were speechless. What was this girl thinking? The person she chose had chosen to go down the path that was almost impossible to achieve without hesitation. It was a path that would lead to certain death. And yet, she did not do anything. She did not intend to correct anything. This was not a lucky situation like the last time. Last time, countless powers were added to his body to maintain the effect for a short period of time. But this time, he chose to fall into the abyss himself. He intended to turn that level of power into a normal state. This was simply courting death. Did he want to keep the two most opposing powers in the world in a state of harmony and peace? It can't be done. She knew what the two of them were talking about. At that moment, she said calmly, but it won't affect him. He will get what he seeks now, a part of it. Correspondingly, he won't be able to do such an extreme situation again. At least, he won't be able to do it now. The young man's cheeks twitched. You mean he can do it in the future? Not necessarily. She took a sip of tea and put down the teacup. She looked at the abyss that had been completely sealed. It's hard to say if there will be any changes in the future. It's also hard to predict what the outcome will be. However, the primal chaos will change itself to a great extent. That's the result of this choice. It's an established fact. The primal chaos, the young man sighed. He clenched his fist and hammered his palm a few times in frustration. How long is this thing going to evolve and change? I don't know. The young man and the girl looked at each other. The latter shrugged, indicating that she did not know either. If the void know-it-all said that she could not predict the little scion's movements, it was even more impossible for her to see through it. The primal chaos was an unidentified object that existed in the body, lurking in the soul, and subtly changing the past according to the direction of the strongest hint in the heart. Including this time, they had only seen it 3 or 4 times. The carriers that they had seen before had ended halfway through the evolution process. Perhaps the hint was not strong enough, or perhaps it was the result of losing the initial most unique pursuit in a particular aspect. As the source of evolution lost its motivation, it naturally stopped changing and quietly disappeared. But this little inheritor had a one-track mind, a spear, and a great Tao to the end. Only God knew how much he could activate the source of chaos. She did not even know what he would end up like in the end, let alone the others. What a headache. The young man shook his head and sighed. Should I throw down 2 blessings? Maybe I can give him a more positive guidance or something. No need. She shook her head and looked down again. Let's just continue like this. The young man and the girl looked at each other. Both of them lowered their heads and sighed softly. Forget it. They could not care less about this. If she was not worried, why should they be? They could just calmly watch the show. In the abyss shrouded in darkness that the trio stared at, faint mottled radiance was projecting long and narrow lines of light from the gaps of the unsealed space, as if a star shrouded in darkness was trying its best to release its own light. She stared at the mottled light for a long time until the dark void collapsed further. Even the fundamental laws could not maintain its existence and was on the verge of collapse. Only then did she got up and walk toward the darkness on the other side. The body of light dimmed little by little, and the young man and the girl quickly got up and followed her. But I never thought that it would materialize in the end. Although I left a backup plan to crush it in the void, I still feel a little uneasy. Now that it has been banished back, where will it appear the next time? We can't see all the places. They can use all the negative willpower in the world to condense and gradually turn from a shadow into a physical body and descend into the void here. She heard the words of the two and paused for a moment. Before she dissipated, she said softly, "Don't worry, I have a plan. Besides, it's not time yet. They won't appear in this world rashly. That place, it's not that easy to leave. Even if it turns from a shadow into a physical body, it's still just a shadow. As long as the world of order is still the world of order, there's no need to worry about this. The two were walking a little slower, looked at each other. There was no expression on their pale faces. However, their bodies flickered. It was probably some emotional fluctuation. The two shrugged and made a helpless gesture. God knows what she did in the void. But since she said so, well, as usual, they don't have to worry so much. As long as she doesn't suddenly jump out of nowhere, they don't have to worry. As the three of them left, the dark space was gradually filled with mottled light. The gray and mottled light was projected into the void with a black background. It reflected a huge phenomenon. It seemed like the void was distorted. The void was collapsing, and the scene of the creation of heaven and earth was emerging from the chaos. As a strong light suddenly bloomed and drowned everything, the space was completely silent. It was as if he was in a dream. In the dream, he saw himself covered in wounds, dragging his body that was riddled with holes as he stumbled across the shattered land where countless fireworks and energy booms reverberated. The world was silent, and he could not find anything that existed. Suddenly, he turned around and saw a pure light blooming in the shattered starry sky. The light rapidly expanded to the extent that it occupied the entire sky. Then, like a soap bubble, the entire void collapsed under the brilliance of the light, and everything became nothing. Slowly rolling up his eyelids, he saw an unfamiliar ceiling. His vision was still a little blurry. Perhaps it was because he was directly illuminated by the soft light. Suddenly, he remembered that scene. However, he couldn't tell which scene it was. It seemed to be similar. If he had to pinpoint one, he felt that it should be that time 11 years ago. After all, he just came out from that space. How long have those three guys been hiding in the dark? Recalling that heart-wrenching, no, anxious cry, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. They only stopped him when he was at the last step. Speaking of which, they were really observing him in the dark from the beginning. They didn't want to show their faces no matter what. They left him hanging in that damn place. God knows if they were happy to see him depressed. Old urchin. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes and muttered. He turned over from the platform that he was lying on. He should be in the sanctum of origin now. He had been here once. Because it was related to the sanctum of origin, he remembered it very clearly. It should be the place in the sanctum that carried the origin energy. Carefully feeling around the surroundings, he could sense the origin energy lurking in this space. At the moment, there was no situation, so they didn't suddenly go berserk. So, the matter of the cloud continent has come to an end. Yin Nuashing muttered to himself. He looked up at the ceiling in a daze. Since he was already in the sanctum of origin, he should be near the void front line. He didn't expect that he would pass the last part of the journey while he was unconscious. When he woke up, he subconsciously wanted to walk out of the sanctum. But when he reached the door, he suddenly stopped. He waved his hand and took out a mirror. Holding the mirror with both hands, he looked at himself in the mirror. His face didn't change, but his long black hair was gone. It was dyed pure white, just like when he was in observer mode. But this time, only the color of his hair changed. I suddenly remembered that every time the divine body of soul receiving ran out of energy, his hair would turn gray. Yin Nuashing couldn't help but mutter. Other than his hair being dyed by energy, most of the changes that happened to his body were done in the laws, constructs, and order. Those changes couldn't be seen from the outside. He could only vaguely feel that he had changed, but he couldn't tell which part of him had changed. Well, he could only see that he had dyed his hair. As for the result, it was just as he expected. The him that was released could not completely merge with him. There were too many restrictions. It was already quite good that he could achieve this result. The rest could only be slowly figured out in the future. Feng, you're awake? As soon as he walked out of the sanctum, he heard a voice in his soul. It made him pause for a millisecond. It seemed that Hui had sensed the surge of his soul after he woke up. Just as he was about to respond, Hui continued to shout, "You woke up just in time. Come to the wall. The death mist of the abyss is pressing down on you." There's a slight change in the time you woke up. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing wished that he could find a grave and crawl into it. He would crawl out after a few hundred years. This is really never-ending. He rubbed his forehead with a headache and let out a long sigh. It seemed that he hadn't had much time to rest after this series of events. He was really busy for half a day and couldn't rest for even a moment. After muttering for a while, Yun Nuoxing shook his head. His body turned into a black mist and dissipated on the spot. On the wall of the void city, Hui, Jingyun, and the others looked at the death mist of the abyss outside the void seal. The black mist with a little crazy red light was rolling violently. It was like the scene of volcanic clouds rolling with high temperature after a volcanic eruption. Those who had experienced it knew that the next scene was the scene of volcanic ash being pressed to the ground. At the same time, the entire ground would be preserved intact. The model would be preserved. As for the body, forget it. That thing could only be used for burial. Feng has woken up. Hui suddenly raised his head and said something that startled everyone. Jingyan rubbed her face and said, "Hey, I told you it's okay. Isn't he awake now?" Although she said that, the feeling of relief in her words couldn't be hidden from anyone. That's good. He also needs to deal with this situation. No matter what happens next, if Feng is not there, there are many things that can't be done. Hui sighed. Min thought for a while and said, "For example, charging in and unleashing Peerless." Everyone, at the mention of this, they were reminded of the scene of a certain Sir Observer unleashing peerless bravery. That was a scene that was engraved in their souls. They couldn't get rid of it. Hui also shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. In the long run, the entire Void Frontline's impression of Feng would probably only be left with the word peerless. However, it couldn't be helped. That guy's fighting style was indeed too eye-catching and abnormal. It was so abnormal that people could tell at a glance that this guy was definitely not human. In the surging abyssal death fog, a crazy scarlet light kept surging from the bottom and surging to the surface. It seemed like something was trying to emerge from it. The surging energy had already crossed the void and spread to the void frontline. Moreover, from the information received, there should be an overall movement. It was hard to say whether the abyssal death fog would have any big movements this time. After all, it had been dormant for a long time. My hands are a little weak when I think of that 100 million years. The Alliance Master of the Demon Gods Alliance couldn't help but blush. Goosebumps appeared on his small arms and legs. Even if my hands are weak, I still have to fight. To be honest, I don't really want to fight. Right now, I'm exhausted. I just want to find a coffin and lie in it. Then, I'll find someone to carry me away. As soon as the young man's voice fell, a voice came from the space beside everyone, causing them to tilt their heads and look over. They saw a figure with long white hair floating in the air emerge from the black fog, and the energy surging from his body made everyone slightly startled. The aura was unfamiliar, extremely unfamiliar, but that face was familiar to them. Hui was startled when he saw the person who came. He immediately rushed forward and raised his shield. "Who are you? What did you hide, Feng?" Yun Nuoxing glanced at him with a look of disgust, as if he was looking at a maggot. This guy was obviously out to cause trouble. He did not believe that some unscrupulous guardian would not recognize him just because his aura had changed. The movement of his soul was still there. Seeing that Feng wasn't cooperating, Hui smiled awkwardly and scratched his head. "Not cooperating? Feng is so boring." "Ahem. All right, I'll be serious. Don't look at me like that. You've been sleeping for 20 days since we returned to the Void Frontline, according to the time in the realm of the gods." Hui straightened his face and said softly, "If we didn't sense that your origin energy was still active, we would have thought that something had happened to you. Moreover, you were still a ball when we went to see you yesterday. 20 days, huh? That's a little shorter than I thought. I thought that a few months had passed." "Well, something did happen. We can talk about it later. So what did you find?" Yun Nuoxing waved his hand and looked outside the Void Frontline. Through the Void blockade, he looked at the black fog that was boiling like a volcanic cloud. He couldn't help but frown. "The movement is a little big. What's going on? Did you see anything?" "Well, Everyone looked at each other with a bitter smile on their faces. Did this count as something that had happened, or was it something that hadn't happened? Yin Nuashing? Question mark. The last time something like this happened was in the middle of the 100 Million Year War. After that, Hui sighed and stopped Yin Nuashing. He waved his hand, and a projection appeared in front of him. See for yourself, Yin Nuashing frowned. The projection in front of him showed the situation of the void blockade. He could see the void blockade and the abyssal death shroud. It was not the whole picture, but the images and information obtained from thousands of more important observation points were pieced together to form a complete projection. In the image before his eyes, he could see that the massive clouds were flashing with an unusually strong scarlet light, and there seemed to be something moving rapidly in the image. He stared at the moving little details for a while and discovered that it was actually a dense cluster of abyssal death mist derivatives. They were moving around the edge of the abyssal death mist and were rapidly moving in one direction. There were so many of them that they were squeezed together like a black stream. Moreover, in the clouds, the flashing scarlet light would occasionally break, as if it was blocked by something huge. Based on what he saw before his eyes, if he was not mistaken, it should be the movement of a large derivative that was passing by. What's that for? Yin Nuashing was confused. Hui covered his face. From the surface, it looks like the abyssal death shroud derivatives are moving. Keep watching. Yin Nuashing muttered as he watched. Isn't this the situation of mobilizing troops to prepare for war? This? Jing Yun smiled bitterly. We thought the same 2 hours before you woke up. Then, we got everyone ready. Just as we were about to deal with it, they all suddenly lurked into the abyssal death shroud, like fish diving into water. Yin Nuashing was stunned. What? They were like fish that suddenly came out to take a breath, and then they all went back into the abyssal death shroud. Huey's voice carried a tone of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He could not help but shake his head. Unless they rushed into the abyssal death shroud, we could not see the situation deeper. So, we could only see the surface. Look at them. Up and down, up and down. I don't know how many times they ran back and forth. Yin Nuashing, at this moment, a beautiful figure suddenly ran out beside Jing Yuanji and said in realization, I know, they're running a marathon. Yin Nuashing, girl, don't say anything. So then, is there anything else? They've been running back and forth in front of the void seal for 6 hours. Hui slapped his face and naturally followed Cuyu's words. They're really running a marathon here. Yin Nuashing was speechless. It can't be that they're celebrating a festival. There shouldn't be any festivals in the underworld. Everyone smiled bitterly. This topic would become very strange if they continue to talk about it. Chapter 1660. The most miserable thing in this world was to have an extraordinarily powerful enemy right before your eyes. Even if you knew that you could not win, you still had to step forward and pretend to be better than anyone else to fight them head-on. If there was something even more insufferable, it would be when they were clearly moving on a large scale right before your eyes, leaving you completely clueless as to what they were doing. And yet, there was no way to ignore their unusual movements, and all you could do was stare hard. Stare so hard that your spirit would wither and your soul would split apart. That was the situation right now anyway. Hui and the others stared at the abyssal death mist spawns running back and forth, as if they were running a marathon. Even if they knew that they would not fall into a state of confusion for no reason, they could not find a situation that could cause them to behave that way. Countless images flashed in their minds like a revolving lantern, flickering along with their endless running, leaving them very troubled. Could it be that their brains were finally corrupted by the abyssal death mist? No, that's not right. They seemed to have been corrupted all along. Their mental state had always been off. Now, there was no telling if the underworld fellows were finally corrupted by the abyssal death mist as well. Or, forget it. Let's not dwell on that question. Either way, none of them were normal. Yin Nuashing felt that his state of mind and expression after waking up was quite normal. It was only when he received the image that gathered most of the information from the void front line from Hui that he felt his face stiffen a little. and, judging from the equally exciting expressions of the others, his face might be performing some sort of difficult performance. Huge numbers of abyssal death mist spawns were whizzing past the edge of the abyssal death mist at a rapid speed in the same direction. If he guessed correctly, the movement within the abyssal death mist was the high-profile movement of the spawns and more things related to the abyssal death mist. Linking the panoramic view of the entire blockade, they were running madly around the entire region surrounded by the abyssal death mist. Good heavens, were they really running a marathon in front of them? It's been an hour. Yin Nuoxing pulled his stiff gaze away from the image and looked at the scene before his eyes. He could see the abyssal death shroud through the void and the void seal barrier, and saw countless dense black dots rolling and surging by the edge of the massive cloud-like storm. The movement within the abyssal death shroud was also becoming more intense, and then suddenly dimming at a certain moment. It was also one of the anomalies of the abyssal death shroud. It appeared to be mobilizing and gathering energy on a large scale, and then instantly throwing it into the void. He had been here for an hour since he woke up, and completely did not understand what was going on. We've been standing here for hours. He covered his face and shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. I couldn't come up with a conclusion, no matter how much I guessed. When I saw that you woke up, I hurriedly called you over to see if you could find anything. I don't know if it's because of the contact with us in the Cloud Continent a few days ago. Nothing's wrong with those bastards. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and pushed the image in front of him away. But that contact was only with the abyssal death shroud. It said that after throwing the abyssal death shroud into the Cloud Continent, they ran away after observing for a while. Well, they probably ran away when I was about to kill the abyssal death shroud. They're very slippery. Although I'd like to say that they don't intend to fight head-on for the time being, looking at the situation before us, he glanced at the abyssal death shroud, and after a moment of silence, he sighed. They can't be playing mind games, right? Everyone smiled bitterly. It's not that. It's really not that. They have to use all their strength to deal with a wave of attacks. Why would they need to play mind games? Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment. After thinking for a long time, he felt that even if he continued to stand here, he would not be able to obtain any useful information. So, he ran his consciousness into his soul and found the little angel who had been sleeping in his soul world since he woke up. Girl, can you see anything? The little angel tilted her head when she heard that. I think I can feel something. Is that so? You can't see. Huh. Yin Nuoxing was about to sigh when he suddenly froze. He saw the little angel staring at him speechlessly. He scratched his head awkwardly and said, all right. I heard it clearly. What did you feel? The little angel was of the same origin as them. The only difference was that she chose a different path. That was all. If it was possible, he did not intend to come over and ask her. The golden eyes of the little angel flickered. Gradually, a faint black color surged in her eyes. The cloud-like energy shone in her eyes. After a while, she said softly, I can't feel it very clearly. It seems that something has happened in the depths of that place. That's why they are moving on a large scale. We don't know much about them, so we can't figure it out. But we can't rule out the possibility that they are feigning attack on the surface and doing something else secretly. After all, this is not the first time something like this has happened. She was right. They could not rule out the possibility that the little angel was putting on a show in front of them. And the show was very lively. As for what they were hiding, his only guess was that it was related to the world of order. In the past, most of the things that the Abyss Death Mist and the Underworld did behind the scenes were mostly related to the world of order. And they were sneaking their hands into the void of order that they could not observe. Usually, these deadly little tricks in such an inconspicuous corner were really deadly. It was the same that time in the Black Nest. He tried to imagine what would happen if those people from the underworld came across the relic of origin. Well, the ending could not be worse. Yin Nuoxing sighed. His consciousness returned to the outside world and told everyone about this matter. Hui and the others immediately muttered, so what happened in the void of order that we couldn't observe? Is there something else that's worthy of their attention? Could it be that Huey's eyes flickered. He exchanged a look with Yun Nuashing. The latter heard this and let out a long sigh of relief. She rubbed her forehead with a headache. He was referring to the alter consciousness of the core of the primordial realm. The last time they were caught, they did see the abnormal movements of the abyss death mist. But the movement this time was even stranger than the last time. It was so strange that even Yin Nuashing could not determine what was going on. Yin Nuashing looked at the young leader and suddenly said, "Has the abyss death mist made any strange movements in the past period? Let's count from the day we left." The young man crossed his arms and pondered for a moment. He searched his memory and then shook his head. Nothing special. Every node in the void front line has an exchange of information every day. There is nothing noteworthy in the exchange of information every day. Except this time, they have been acting strangely for a few hours. Yin Nuashing knocked on her head. Her thoughts went in a circle and came back to the original point. Anyway, first of all, we need to urgently confirm the situation in the Void of Order. The territories that have been observed. Yin Nuashing suddenly looked up. Don't let your guard down, even if the territories are included in the Void blockade. Black Nest is also in the Void of Order. We don't know how they got behind us. It's about that. At the mention of that, Jing Nuashing had something to say. We already had a conclusion before you woke up. They must have gotten something from the heavenly god of origin that allowed them to directly come into contact with some places related to the heavenly god of origin. Looking at the current situation of the Void blockade, even if the heavenly god of origin did everything he could, he would not be able to pass through the Void blockade without causing a stir. The same goes for the heavenly gods of origin. Is that so? Just as Yin Nuashing was about to pull his hair, he suddenly realized that there seemed to be some hidden information in this sentence. He raised his head stiffly and said, "Do you think they found another place related to the origin heavenly god? And now they are?" Everyone's expression stiffened as soon as she said that. Hui immediately put on a look of immortality and distress. The shadow of the cloud continent is still lingering in our minds. Can we not do these exciting things so quickly? It would be nice if we could go over and take a look. The pestle alone can't see anything through the void. Yin Nuashing scratched her head in distress. Just as she was wondering if she should take the risk and rush over to take a look, she was suddenly interrupted by a report from the person who was responsible for observing the abyssal death shroud. "My lord, we have observed a huge energy gathering in the abyssal death shroud. It is on the verge of a dangerous level and is still getting stronger." As soon as Yin Nuashing looked up, Hui waved his hand and said, "It's the fourth time. That energy has accumulated for the fourth time." Yin Nuashing nodded and continued to ponder. Everyone also expressed their concern and turned their attention away. They were used to it. No. This is not something that could be dismissed with an "oh." Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly and waved her hand to break the strange atmosphere. "Anyway, what is the situation with the forces of order now? They're all on standby. The forces that were searching for the unobserved void of order have all been called back. If something really happens, we will be on the alert. After all, even if the enemy does not look right, it does not mean that we can relax. Let's just prepare for war." Hui said. "Then let's be alert for a while." Yin Nuashing poked his forehead and sighed deeply. "Let's get all the forces of order ready for the next war. Anyway, let's get ready first. Get all the energy towers and energy defenses ready. We'll treat it as if it's really going to start a war in the next second until we know why they're going crazy. What the hell is this? Even if there's really going to be a war, we won't be able to withstand it." Everyone expressed their agreement tiredly, including the supplementary arrangements. It wouldn't take long for everything to be ready. For the time being, they would just treat it as if they really wanted to cause trouble and guard against it. The abyssal death mist manifestation wouldn't feel tired, but it would take a lot of effort for them to constantly mobilize people to be on alert and watch. They might as well just prepare for battle and stay at the nodes. After that, they discussed and supplemented the situation, and at the same time speculated on what they were going to do. About 10 minutes later, a report from various places in the Order Void basically ruled out the possibility that they had poked their hands into the Void sealing circle. Now, The only thing left was the situation in the unobserved order void that wasn't clear. But then again, it wasn't clear on that side either. Since it was said that it was unobserved, how could they determine the situation there? That's true, but we can't just wait passively. Yin, Nuashing, and Hui looked at each other. Clenching their fists, energy surged over their bodies as if it was a signal. We can't just stand here and watch. Why don't we go and take a look? It's a good opportunity for me to test out my current state. At the same time, I'll try to see if I can figure out what the other side is up to. I did think about it. Just imagining it would require your help, Maple. So I called you. Hui was halfway through his words when the Order warrior in charge of observing the abyssal death shroud shouted, "My lord, that energy, it's dispersing again, right?" Hui exhaled as soon as he opened his mouth. Seeing that the Order warrior nodded awkwardly, he anxiously tugged at his own face. "Maple, bring your weapons. We'll charge in and kill them all." Jingyan quickly shook her head and objected. No, no, no. We shouldn't act rashly before figuring out what they are up to. If something really happens and we're not in good shape, wouldn't that be nonsense? That's true. Yin Nuashing, who is used to charging forward bravely, breathed a long sigh of relief. He understood Jing Yun's concern, but he still wanted to go in and take a look. How about this? Hui and I will go in and scout. Don't worry, we won't go too far. With our combined power, as long as there aren't 100 primeval heavenly gods hiding in the abyssal death shroud, we'll be able to come out unscathed. Jingyan stared blankly at Yin Nuashing for a while. Realizing that he was not joking, she spread her hands helplessly. All right, since you've put it that way, I'll activate part of the origin node's power and try to penetrate the abyssal death shroud to see what's on the other side of the void. You two try your best to open a gap so that we can see from here. Then I'll go and gather the special forces. Some of them have mastered a little power against the abyssal death shroud after years of fighting. I'll see if it can be of any use, and let them observe the abyssal death shroud from the void or something. The League Master of the Demon Gods League left in a flash. After watching the young man leave, we clapped his hands and said to the others, "Then let's be alert and get ready for the moment. Let's not talk about the abyssal death shroud and the underworld for now. First of all, we have to prepare ourselves. No matter what those bastards are planning to do, let's just treat it as some unknown conspiracy. From now on, each node will expand the range of monitoring the Void of Order. Find a group of fast teams and split them into two groups. One group will investigate the known Void of Order, and the other group will explore the unobserved Void of Order. I'll let a group of warriors from the Celestial Realm lead the team here. The rest of the team will be at your disposal, as long as they run fast enough." Yin Nuashing's eyes flashed. He found a bad memory from his memory. When Hui was done, he added, "From now on, the Void Frontline will enter a state of control. No unregistered personnel will be allowed to enter the Void Frontline. Remember, no matter who it is, if you receive an order from someone to come to the Void Frontline, you must first go through 100 confirmations from the person himself. Make sure that your soul is in good condition before you can rest assured." Hui immediately knew what he was worried about. "Feng, are you worried that the incident at the Void Frontline will repeat itself? These things can't be said for sure. Since the distorted race could sneak in, there's no guarantee that there won't be another group of people from the world of order who would come and cause trouble, or perhaps seek refuge with the underworld or something. This has already happened once, so we have to be wary of it happening again." Yin Nuashing nodded and crossed his arms. Furthermore, the underworld people themselves are also life forms of order. Even if a proper underworld person appears in front of us, no one would be able to recognize him without the presence of the abyssal death shroud. By the way, if that's the case, we should also investigate all the strangers who have entered the Void Frontline recently. If there's an easier way to defeat the enemy, why not? The Void Frontline collapsed so quickly that even we did not expect it to happen. The classification of schemes and conspiracies is bullsh*t. As long as it can kill the enemy, it's a good strategy. This is the battlefield of the Void, a battlefield close to order and chaos. Those people who talk about rules and regulations, justice and light, The light they dissipate is enough to light up half of the void. We don't have to deal with those things of etiquette and etiquette. We just have to do our best to survive. That's what we need to do. This was a battlefield that could not be remembered. At least, most of the life forms would not be able to remember this battlefield. They would not be able to spread the news. Furthermore, to treat those who had never met, had no conversation with them, and whose minds were only filled with destruction, with respect? Forget it. He would only communicate and communicate with the same degree of destruction. Having said that, Yin Nuoxing breathed a long sigh of relief. His mind was still full of ways to deal with this unusual situation. He glanced towards the void, a black light flashing in his eyes. Also, have the void frontline and the void blockade prepare to retreat. The coordinates of the retreat position have been given to you a long time ago. If there's an emergency and you can't deal with it, retreat with the entire defensive line there. Lord Feng, what's the purpose of that position? Jing Yuanji could not help but ask. In her impression, Lord Feng would not be the first to suggest a retreat unless there was an emergency. There's a little arrangement that I left in the void before we fought the death mist head-on. Yin Nuoxing nodded and sighed. It's almost time to use it. Well, in my original plan, I shouldn't have used it so early. After all, it's the two ultimate defensive lines that I left behind as the final line of defense in the Void of Order. Now that they have been strengthened along with my transformation, if it's used now, defeat is almost certain. Hui gulped. For Feng to use the word ultimate, one could imagine how much effort he had put into those two defensive lines. Yin Nuoxing nodded. It's just an order, just in case. It's best not to use it now if possible. The meaning of a trump card is when the cards are flipped, but if the cards are flipped too quickly, there won't be any trump cards to use. That's it. There shouldn't be anything more to arrange. If there is, inform me via soul transmission later. Dismiss and prepare. As you command, Lord Feng. After arranging these things and watching everyone leave, Yin Nuoxing stretched lazily. It was only now that he recovered from the stupor of waking up. He looked at Jing Yuanji and a few little girls who could not hold it in and were finally released for a breather, as well as Jingyan. The others went to arrange their own things. Men went to mobilize the power of the Void Court to cause trouble in the void. Other than the people from the realm of the gods, their people were the most agile. It was probably because they used the void as their energy source. Phew, it's all arranged for now. My defensive nodes are basically open. Come to think of it, we found the Temple of Origins in the void. A considerable portion of it would require your help to activate, since we can't handle those origin energies. Jingyan said and smiled faintly. But there's no rush. We're still in the midst of repairs. First, we have to restore the basic structure of the nodes, which will take some time. When do you plan to depart? Yin Nuoxing, who had just smiled bitterly, put on a calm expression as she subconsciously turned towards the direction of the abyssal death shroud. Let's wait and see for a while. Hui and I will use a special method to observe the abyssal death shroud's movements before testing it out. However, if it doesn't calm down before a certain time limit, we'll rush in. Before that, it's best if we don't rush and head on. What if they don't intend to attack us in the first place? If we rush in and they really attack us, wouldn't we be dead? The World of Order needed more time to prepare more power. On the other hand, the Underworld and the Abyssal Death Shroud were also using this time to accumulate power. He could not calculate which side had the advantage in the passage of time, so he could only let time pass and see. No matter how much he liked Kai Wushuang, he would not be unable to wait for the necessary time. Oh, Feng, you become more cautious. Shouldn't you shout and rush in to illuminate this part of the void with the radiance of origin? Hui laughed evilly as he poked Yin Nuoxing with his elbow. Yin Nuoxing glanced at him, turned her head, and flung her white hair at his face. Unrelated personnel, please don't open your mouth. Hui continued to smile mischievously. You can't do anything to me if I open my mouth. Sorry, I was wrong. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes as she retracted the surging origin energy. I just need a target to practice on. Do you want to take the position before the Abyssal Death Shroud? No, no. Hui laughed dryly as he waved his hand. It's bad for the body. Chapter 1661. In the time that followed, or at least for a day after the mysterious incident, the Void front line was shrouded in a stifling atmosphere. Both inside and outside the Void City, defensive and combat forces were armed to a frightening degree, and there were no sentries or sentries on the surface. Instead, there were thousands upon thousands of streaks of energy carrying will, and will that spread endlessly like a fountain, encompassing millions of miles with the Void City as the epicenter. Small daily activities in the city were all paused, and it was now a fully armed city with no unrelated personnel. There were also attempts to spread beyond the Void blockade, but the abyssal death shroud was still in a state of incessant charge, and hence the presence of non-order energies that wafted out of the Void City was too great, more or less suppressing the power they spread within the Void City. Even if they continued to spread forcefully, they could not touch the interior of the abyssal death shroud, and hence had to give up. The tense and vigilant atmosphere lasted for an entire day. On the second day, the sun near the Void City would assume that it was the morning sun that shone upon the Void City. The Void was peaceful. There was no unknown energy eruption, nor was there any unusual movement. The abyssal death shroud was surging along with their spawns, as usual, like a torrential river that lay before them. Every wave that was stirred up and every glimmer of energy was a power that could make ordinary worlds of order tremble. Billions of spawns of the abyssal death shroud whizzed past before their eyes, and it must be said that the scene was truly spectacular. Yin Nuoxing, Hui, and the others were standing on the city wall where they had their meeting yesterday. They had not left since yesterday, and when they felt the sun's rays, the former's long eyelashes fluttered. Rubbing his eyes, he took out a windbreaker from his pendant and covered it over Siyu and Feng Qing Wang, who had fallen asleep by his feet, before turning towards Hui, who appeared a little dazed after staring at the abyssal death shroud for an entire day. How is it? How's the situation on your side? For the time being, I haven't seen anything special. Hui let out a long yawn and said lazily, the energy in the abyssal death fog gathers every 1.5 hours and dissipates after about 15 minutes. Except for one time when the time was delayed for 2 hours for unknown reasons, there is no other movement for the time being. They could see a little bit of the situation inside the abyssal death mist through the void, but because they had to resist the influence of the boiling abyssal death mist, they were a little tired because of the excessive consumption of spiritual power. What about you? Yin Nuoxing shrugged. There's no difference. I did let a stream of annihilation energy flow along with the flow of the abyssal death mist after being weakened. However, it was soon drowned by the abyssal death mist. If I use a little more power, I'll be easily discovered. If I use too little, it won't last long in the abyssal death mist. And Yin Nuoxing tilted his head to look at Jing Yuanji. The latter gently shook her head, causing him to sigh softly. I had Yuanji look at the situation of the Order Void and the abyssal death mist in the past 1 or 2 months to see if there was anything that could be easily missed that had changed during the time we were out. It seems that there was no result. Let me see. Huizong took the crystal ball that contained the information of the entire Void front line from Jing Yuanji and used his spiritual power to quickly flip through the information in it. Soon, his face was wrinkled like a bitter gourd and his facial features were squeezed together. Yin Nuoxing saw it and sighed softly. I plan to go in and take a look if there is no result in another 2 or 3 hours. Although I have a feeling that even if I go in and walk around, I won't get anything. Huh? This is... A surprised voice suddenly came from Huey's side. Yin Nuoxing and Jing Yuanji looked at each other and leaned over. What is it? Did you find something that you missed? Should I say that I found something, or I instinctively feel that something is not right? I have looked through all the information, big and small, and there is nothing wrong. But if we arrange all the information in a period of time, Feng, you can start from here. Hui handed over the crystal ball in his hand. When he saw Yin Nuoxing lowering his head to check the situation, he said, in this period of time, from this point until today, which is 3 or 4 months ago, the activity of the abyssal death mist seems to be more frequent than before. The activity of the abyssal death mist is also the same, but this part of the activity is still within the alert range. It is far from being abnormal. Yin Nuashing quickly flipped through the information and nodded. It has seemed to be the case. It seems to have entered a period of frequent activity, like some kind of seasonal animal preparing for a large-scale migration. And now, the entire race has really started to move to other places. It just seems to be the case. The abyssal death mist derivatives do not have this kind of characteristic. Yin Nuashing lowered her head and continued to flip through the information in the crystal ball. And from this period of frequent movement, every time they move more than the silence value, it is exactly the same amount. There is no more and no less. Do you think of anything? Some kind of fixed activity with a limited range and degree? Like they're holding back their energy to do something? We tried to say. Feng pondered for a while and shook his head to express his denial. He was also puzzled. Then I'm not sure, but 3 or 4 months ago, we thought about it and looked at Yin Nuashing. If we count 3 or 4 months in our time, we were still in the cloud continent at that time, right? It seems that there were also people from the underworld lurking in the lower continent of Black Nest at that time. Could there be some kind of connection? 3 or 4 months, corresponding to the cloud continent, was about 1 or 2 months ago. At that time, its energy just happened to erupt on the cloud continent, so it should be limited to the cloud continent. However, we can't rule out the possibility that they in the lower continent sensed the boiling of the chaos energy and made some preparations. It told me that those fence-sitters in the underworld were after the origin relic. As for why they did not make a move for so long, I think they should know that it is on the cloud continent, so it is difficult for them to make a move. We spread his hands. Then nothing happened after that. They only came out about 20 days ago and then disappeared. The part of the troops that came out of the bubble was also suppressed by us. Who knows if they felt that something was wrong in advance and stopped some kind of joint action at the same time. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh and threw the crystal ball to Hui. These things can't prove anything, and there is no way to explain anything. If it weren't for their abnormal behavior at the moment, I might not have associated this part of the information with the cloud continent. These sudden and frequent activities, big and small, have no meaning. The deeper we investigate, the more complicated it will be. Maybe there is actually no relationship between these two things at all. Maybe every abnormal activity is just a kind of independent event. But on the other hand, we can't rule out the possibility that they are connected as a whole, right? Hui smiled bitterly. Seeing Feng nodding, he smiled bitterly. This won't work. It's so difficult. I don't know how far it will take to deduce it slowly. Why don't we just go and walk around? That was decided at the beginning. It's just a question of when to go. Yin Nuashing shook her head and sighed. Let me try to adjust the energy again. There is still more than an hour before the time limit in the heart. Although I don't think there will be any results in more than an hour. We couldn't help but say, I have to give it a try. Although I don't think it's a big deal to just charge in. Yin Nuashing glanced at Hui, then looked at the abyssal death fog that was surging with wind and clouds. But will you let me charge in without worry? Hui and Jing Yuanji shook their heads so hard that they almost saw a shadow. Yin Nuashing shrugged. That's it. So, you just have to pray that I can find something in this hour so that I don't have to take the risk of running inside. Hui smiled bitterly. Hoping or not, and what would actually happen were two completely different things. No one could control this. But for now, they just had to pray honestly. Wait a minute. Who should they pray to? Hui and Jing Yuanji looked at each other. After a moment, both of them came to a realization. Together, they faced Yin Nuashing and put their palms together to pray for blessings. Yin Nuashing, why are they praying to him for something? What is this? He can't protect himself even if he prays to anyone. Nonsense. Well, just take it as a blessing. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh. Her soul power wrapped in a wisp of annihilation energy quickly approached the abyss death fog. It was also at this moment that a golden light suddenly lit up in the bottom of her heart. She was stunned. Girl, something exists. I can clearly feel it. Something is affecting them, little angel, Mei Mao's golden light flickered. For the first few times, she did not follow Yun Nuoxing's consciousness. This time, she was worried that he would really rush out after an hour. So, she released a wisp of consciousness to follow him. However, she did not expect that this wisp of consciousness would have a strange feeling as soon as it rushed out of the void seal. That strand of annihilation energy stopped galloping because of this sentence and turned into a cloud of mist on the spot. Yin Nuoxing looked at the little angel in the spiritual world. She was curled up on the flower bed and staring at Frost in a daze. When he came closer, she slowly came back to her senses and said in an unusually weak voice, There's a strong will circulating in the abyss of death fog, affecting them. Yin Nuoxing went to her and helped her lie down on the bed. He reached out and pressed his hand between her brows. If the abyss death fog could affect the abyss death fog, it could also affect her. Previously, nothing happened because they did not cross the void seal. Now that they had left the barrier of order, the abnormal situation happened. Anyway, he should go back first. If he still had to go forward, the girl would stubbornly follow him. He could not just watch the girl suffer and continue to rush forward. First of all, he had to sort out the new information he had obtained in the past minute. If what she said was true, the abyssal death shroud was indeed affected, and if he looked at it from a different angle, it did seem like the abyssal death shroud was struggling inexplicably, trying to break free from some kind of latent control. Not all of the abyssal death shroud was struggling, but if the abyssal death shroud and its derivatives were all cells and components in a living body, then this living body was struggling, and the cells and components were all moving at full speed and in a chaotic manner. From an outsider's point of view, it probably looked like it had gone mad. However, a powerful will? What kind of will could affect the brainless abyss death fog? They were not like the chaos soldiers created by the chaos specter and could still be controlled. The abyssal death mist was a crude product, a crude, cheap, and easy-to-use imitation, a crude replica that did not have much resemblance to the real thing, crude. That was what he meant. What he meant was that the abyssal death mist was very difficult to control. He had always been very curious about how those people in the underworld could make these things that were basically difficult to receive or to obey. He could not touch it, nor could he see it. The only thing he could suspect was that high-level component. It was probably through controlling that component to control the abyssal death mist. Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. Wait, let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about what the part that the underworld used to extract the abyss death fog is? This question is too core. Hui was confused. Hui was in a daze. He touched his face and muttered, Based on our current information, no, it's just a guess. Everything is just a guess. We don't have any real information at all. It's a heavenly god of primordial beginning. Something happened to it in the 41st era, and, well, it's probably dead. If it's not dead, it's half paralyzed. It was picked up by those guys in the underworld. Maybe they found something from it directly, or maybe they found something from it after studying it. Anyway, its appearance helped them to carry out their plan, and then, that's it. Crossing the 40th era, surviving the turbulence of the void, surviving the chaos tie that Jing Yun and the others mentioned, and then appearing in the 41st era as the heavenly god of Yuanshi. Yin Nuoxing's expression suddenly became serious. Does such a creature exist in this world? Huey's expression also became solemn in an instant. The information that they had guessed before was fragmented and could barely stand. However, due to the lack of a lot of key information, there was no way to make a deduction. Until Jing Yun came, no one thought that there was anything wrong with the part being a primeval god, and there was indeed no mistake in this point. The part must have been a primeval god when it was alive. The splitting energy that it created could sweep half of the void of order. Other than the primeval god, who else in this era could do that? And it was definitely a mid-level or even a high-level primeval god. Let's get someone more professional to explain this matter. Hui knocked his head, feeling a headache. He quickly found Jing Yun's soul seed, and then threw all the core information about the underworld that they had sorted out for countless years to her. Jing Yun, put down what you're doing first. There are more important things here. Fo may have gotten some incredible information, and you need to judge it yourself. What you need is information about the last era and the primeval god, right? Jing Yun immediately guessed that the obviously targeted statement. She immediately stopped what she was doing in the sanctum of origins, and then opened her soul to let the information in. A moment later, she said with a slightly trembling voice, "That's a bit outrageous and serious. The influence of the tide of chaos is absolute. I've only told you that we are all primeval gods, but I didn't tell you the details." Jing Yin found a wall in the sanctum and sat down. She said in a low voice, 30% of us are high-level primeval. Even so, we have all returned to the peak of origin. The primeval god is like a dream, washed away by the tide of chaos. Only a little root is left, and there's no way for us to grow again. Yin Nuoxing and the other's cheeks twitched, and the new information was even more serious. Then what the hell is that part? Well, Jingyan was silent. She also threw the information to the others. The group of people gathered and discussed. About a minute later, they said in a low voice, "I don't know. Theoretically, there shouldn't be any place in the void that is immune to the tide of chaos. Even the sanctum of origins, which is fully energized, can't do that. So, I can only guess that the underworld has used some method to completely cut off all the connections between their native space and the void. Space, time, rules, concepts, order, and even everything. Only then can they create a territory with immunity, and this territory must be of a certain size to maintain its existence. So, theoretically, there shouldn't be a high-level primeval part that has fought with the lord of the underworld." Things took a big turn, and then they were slapped into a discus, as if they were back to square one. Yin Nuoxing rubbed her forehead with a headache. This operation is not much different from directly changing the order of the void. There's a difference. Changing the void isn't as easy as you think it is, Yi Fuqian said. Jingyan explained. It's much more difficult to adjust and alter order, rules, and concepts on a large scale in the void compared to creating an exempt space. While the process is similar, the underworld's methods are probably only enough for them to circle out an area and alter it. It's either a one-time thing, or there's no way to expand the space, or the restriction of order only allows such a small space, and if they expand it any further, the original space would be replaced. Such things happen occasionally in our era, and since the void would adjust itself, it would only cause a small commotion, and it would be over after a short while. So, this immune space is actually quite common in the mythological era. Jingyan shook her head. The process of researching immune space is quite common, and there are many people. But as far as I know, there is no finished product. However, although there is no finished product, there is indeed someone who can do it. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath and asked, "The heavenly god of origin." His tone and his pause were filled with deep meaning. Jingyan nodded solemnly. "That's right." Yin Nuoxing slapped himself in the face. "Here it comes, here it comes, here it comes again. If the origin heavenly god and the others could do it, he really wouldn't be surprised at all. Bastard. That group of beings who were equivalent to the concept of order could do anything to the void with just a flick of their fingers. At most, they could squat on a rock and assume the posture of a thinker and grope around for a while." Jingyan took a deep breath. If I'm not wrong, the underworld's current space is either created by the god of origins and the others, or they have the power left behind by the god of origins. Both possibilities are possible. As the companion realm of the god realm, it is possible that the netherworld itself has immunity. On the other hand, it is also possible that the lost races of that era were fence-sitters who wandered between the two realms. Furthermore, the origin heavenly god mentioned something like netherworld rebellion. Yin Nuoxing rubbed his face anxiously, and they're suspected to be looking for the thing left behind by the god of origins. The latter possibility is also very high. Hui hammered his head on the wall and heaved a long sigh. All right, the reason why the underworld has the power of the Yuanshi realm has basically been figured out. Let's put this aside for now. What is that high-grade Yuanshi component? First of all, we can rule out that the component comes from the underworld. Otherwise, there is no need to fight, and the Lord of the Underworld was injured because of it. There was a moment of silence in the soul communication. Yin Nuoxing and Jingyan both pulled their hair and sighed. Yin Nuoxing sighed. So, hypothetically, I'm saying hypothetically, under the condition that there is no immunity space, using one's body to resist the turbulence of the void, and being hit by the tide of chaos head-on, only half of one's body will be paralyzed and his soul will be separated from his body. He will still retain the power of a high-grade primeval realm. But perhaps Shirleji will not be able to move, and his body will only be left with self-protection instincts. If this situation is allowed to happen, what will happen? Well, if all these situations are allowed, then the so-called high-grade primeval component. Jingyan took a deep breath. Perhaps it is a chaos concept body. Yin Nuoxing and Hui both said, What? The abyssal death shroud and the shroud of divine destruction belong to the power of the chaos level. It actually makes sense if you think about it that way, right? Jingyan spread his hands and began to connect the series of events. If this theory is correct, then the underworld and the others had captured a chaos concept body that had lost all ability to move in that battle in the 41st era and attempted to extract the power of chaos concept from it, which is what you call the annihilation energy. However, just like the origin energy, it is not something that can be obtained at will. Perhaps there was some influence in the process, which led to them finally obtaining the weakened annihilation energy, which is the abyssal death shroud. By the way, the abyssal death shroud spawn itself is a weakened version of the soldiers of chaos, which ties everything together. Yin Nuoxing took in a deep breath. Shocked, this was truly shocking. His scalp had gone numb for a long time. He had never thought that those fellows from the underworld would be able to capture a living chaos demon shadow in their life of being fence-sitters. Furthermore, they might even be able to obtain the power of the origin heavenly god. This profit was simply too great. This was probably the strongest fence-sitter in the void. Is it too late to surrender by the beginning of spring next year? Hui laughed bitterly. There was no way to fight this. How could they fight when the two powers at the highest level of order could be grasped with both hands? Jingyan heaved a long sigh. The probability of this situation should not be less than 70%. If this is the truth, we probably have to rely on you to obtain that slim chance of victory. My shoulder will break, really. Yin Nuoxing's face turned green. What he meant was that he had to maintain this state and continue to evolve to enter the primeval realm. Ha ha ha, shit-eating thing. Chapter 1662. As the dense fog of doubt was uncovered bit by bit, as they gradually walked towards the truth and reality, there would occasionally be situations where the more the truth was revealed, the worse it would get. Sometimes, it would be better not to mention certain things or not to know about them at all. That way, they could still maintain the state of ignorance and fearlessness. Now that everything was exposed, it was purely a blow to their morale. Good Lord, one hand grabbing the chaos specter and draining its energy, while the other wields the power of the heavenly god of origin. Doing whatever he wants, treating the entire void as his own backyard, doing whatever he wants. This is really impudent. However, there was nothing else he could do apart from roaring. The possibility of stopping Carwins from doing anything was decreasing with each new revelation. The more Carwins learned, the more fearful he became. Right in front of Carwins and the others was the power of hell that was constantly being displayed on the table. At a glance, Carwins and the others could see that Carwin's power had already piled up into a small mountain. Meanwhile, on the table in front of Carwins and the others, a single ball was gone. By the way, why are we suddenly talking about this topic? Could it be that we have discovered something incredible in the abnormal abyssal death mist? Jing Yunyun suddenly said. Although the result of the speculation was very worrying, they still had to put an effort to deal with this terrible future. The first thing they had to deal with now was the abyssal death mist that was currently undergoing changes. Yin Nuoxing let out a long breath and regained her calm expression. It was very important to uncover the truth. No matter from which aspect, the closer they were to the truth, the more preparations they would have. However, that could be put aside for now. There were priorities. The things that were revealed now were things that they would have to deal with later. And now, there were more important things in front of them. The abyssal death mist was still running a marathon. If they did not deal with the abnormal situation in front of them, how could they talk about the future? The girl told me that a powerful will has appeared in the abyssal death mist. This will has affected the abyssal death mist. The chaotic situation in front of us might be due to the influence of that will. So, I speculate that there might be a problem with that component. The will of the component, huh? Because the abyssal death mist manifestation was born because of the netherworld and the others, but the will of the component itself. After all, this is its own power to begin with. It's very easy to command it. Jingyin stood up, leaning against the wall. She put her hand on the windowsill and looked at the abyssal death mist in the distance, her eyes flashing. After all, they are chaotic concept bodies. They won't die so easily. Maybe they are tormenting themselves. Are you planning to return your soul? Hui smiled bitterly. It's hard to say. Didn't you meet a chaos concept body not long ago? Naturally, other chaos concept bodies are allowed to exist. By the way, did something like that happen before? The abyssal death mist is running a marathon. No, not at all. Hui shook his head and said, since a long time ago, before we participated in the war, we have been observing the death fog of the abyss. Although there have been intermittent observations, we have not found any symptoms of the death fog of the abyss. This happened all of a sudden. Could it be related to your previous encounter with the chaotic concept body? Yin Nuoxing. Could it be that the one in the underworld is its real body? There can't be such a coincidence, can there? Last time, it said we finally meet or something. Jing Yin shook her head. It's really hard to say. Even if it's only in a half-paralyzed state, they can still sense things around energy through the power they left behind in the world. It's hard to confirm if the chaotic concept body that the death fog of the abyss belongs to is the same as the one you met on the cloud continent. Maybe it is that one, or it may have heard about your situation from other chaotic concept bodies. After all, your situation is so special that even they are interested in it. This is not good. This is not good. This is not fun. Yin Nuoxing's face turned green. This wonderful popularity just had to develop in such a strange place. Look at the things that are interested in him now. The god of origins, the chaotic concept body. One is equal to order, the other is equal to chaos. Wait a minute. Doesn't this mean that the void is paying attention to him? Good heavens. So the matter that was decided by the great will of the void was caused by you guys. No wonder he was unlucky every day. Wherever he went, there would be explosions. Wherever he went, there would be bad luck. It turned out that he was targeted by the two deadliest people in the void. Then it's fine. He admitted that he was unlucky. Serve him right. He was deep in thought. Suddenly, he felt that the atmosphere around him was not right. He turned around and saw Maple's gloomy face muttering, "It's not my fault. It's all your fault. I don't care. This has nothing to do with me. Of all things, why are you staring at me? I'm eating your rice. Anyway, I'm the most damned bastard in the void. The void should just be destroyed." The resentment was so great that it made Hui shiver. That, Maple? Yin Nuoxing calmed down. His gloomy face instantly disappeared. He smiled bitterly at Hui. I thought that the matter that was decided by the great will of the void was just a joke. Hui shook his head vigorously. No, no, no. That is an established fact. Screw you. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. What I mean is, look at now. The origin heavenly god is staring at me for no reason. The chaotic concept body is staring at me. These two together are equivalent to the void staring at me. Of course, they're of a much higher level than the void. Hui drew a few lines in his mind. After a while, he nodded in realization. Then, he could not help but laugh. You didn't admit that you were decided by the void before. Now that the evidence is irrefutable, what else do you have to say? Although it is the truth, I really want to beat you up for saying it out loud. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. After a while, he felt tired all over. He sighed helplessly. Why don't I just die early and reincarnate in this life? You can't do that, Maple. Your soul has been remembered. Shut up. I know I'm just nagging. Can you not drag me into such a cruel reality? Face the light of the void's reality, child. Hui opened his arms and looked at Yin Nuoxing with a compassionate look. You need the voids, get lost. Jing Yin listened to the friendly interaction between the two and did not interrupt. She turned around and continued to listen to the friendly conversation between the two. She wanted to give the young man some buffer time so that he would not be too stressed. She turned around and was about to continue using the function of the origin altar. Suddenly, she was startled. Huh? Young man, stop for a moment. I suddenly thought of something. What is it? Yin Nuoxing and Hui looked at each other. They stopped their daily conversation and quickly put on a serious expression. Jing Yun used the origin altar to spy on the abyssal death shroud and observe its movements. She could even increase the order energy by a lot. After a while, she said, "This is a good opportunity. You want to do something while the abyssal death shroud is panicking?" Yin Nuoxing understood what he meant. She crossed her arms and muttered while drawing circles on the ground with the tip of her foot. I've thought about it at first. In the past, it was always the order that was being suppressed. This time, those brainless bastards are finally in trouble. They are panicking and probably can't respond to any big changes. This is indeed a good opportunity. Attacking now is definitely much better than staying in the void's sealing circle and resisting. Looking into Maple's eyes, Hui and Maple's minds clicked. But there is the underworld behind the abyssal death shroud. To be honest, the abyssal death shroud is just a tool used to gradually weaken the Order's power. If we push them too far this time and provoke the underworld's high-tier combatants, the Order still needs a lot of time. After a while, he spread his hands and said, "But even if we give them time, it's probably useless. It won't change anything. Let's fight." As for the underworld, Jing Yin touched her chin and pondered. After a while, she smiled slightly. Don't worry. If there are any high-tier combatants coming out, just leave it to us. We are the original primeval gods, after all. It shouldn't be a problem for us to deal with some of the low-tier primeval gods with only the power of the peak of the primeval gods. Just in case, we can gradually release part of our power. This is a rare opportunity. Even if we have to pay a price, we will accept it. After this opportunity, there might not be a next time. Maple, if you don't have any special arrangements, why don't we take advantage of this opportunity too? We put on a gloomy expression. His palms suddenly drew a cold light in front of him. Yin Nuoxing looked up at Hui. His long eyelashes fluttered. Hui and Jingyan felt that he was weighing and thinking, so they did not say anything. With the power of two kinds of order, he had his own special perception, his own thoughts and foresight. He could even perform some kind of intuition based on the foundation of the void. If he nodded, they would charge over. If he shook his head, they would press everything down. Perhaps it meant that even if the abyssal death shroud was in chaos, it would not be so chaotic that it could not deal with them. Anyway, everything was up to him. Now, they just had to wait for his orders. However, Yin Nuoxing's silence made them very anxious. He just stood there and fiddled with his white long hair without saying a word. He lowered his head as if he was immersed in some kind of special state or sensory. It seemed that he was performing some kind of intuition, as they said. It was an emergency. The waiting time at this critical juncture was very long. They could clearly feel that every minute and second was passing by the whole world. We had been pacing back and forth in the same place for as long as an hour. Every time he turned around and saw Maple still in deep thought, he did not dare to disturb him. He also did not dare to be distracted by other things. He could only wait until there was a result. Time gradually came to the second hour. Unlike Hui, Jingyun was very patient. They had once delayed the expedition to the void of chaos by 1,000 years. They had also waited for 1,000 years, so they were not in a hurry. There was no use in being anxious now. So far, he had been using the Sanctum of Origins to spy on the abyssal death shroud. No, it was not spying, it was looking openly. He could even count how many abyssal death shroud derivatives had passed in front of him in the past 2 hours. And the way they passed by was quite consistent with the situation that the young man said they were in chaos. There were all kinds of trampling and shoving incidents. He even saw a huge derivative stomping on a large pile of cannon fodder when it passed by. The dissipated part of the abyssal death shroud did not condense any new derivatives. It's not just a normal level of chaos. It seems that even the essence of the energy has been affected. The only thing that has not been discovered now is the internal strife. Jing Yun muttered. The abnormal situation in the abyssal death shroud was gradually discovered. Under such a chaotic situation, the abyssal death shroud itself also showed signs of various energy riots. Even the breath it exuded had become very frightening. The order and energy level have increased by 1 or 2 levels. I don't know if it's because of the influence of that will. Is the main body fighting with the parasite for control? It would be good if that was the case. Although in the long run, the sudden revival of a chaos concept body was a very bad thing for the Void of Order, but just talking about the situation at hand, he hoped that the more chaotic it was, the better. Yin Nuoxing suddenly looked up as if he had withdrawn from that strange state. Hui, who was so anxious that oil was almost coming out of his face, and Jing Yun, who was still calm, turned their attention to him at once. "How is it?" they asked in unison. Yin Nuoxing took in a deep breath. Unknowingly, the colorful colors that had spread to his eyes gradually faded away, returning to their original black appearance. He gently raised his hand and waved it in front of him. A sentence that did not fluctuate in the slightest was spoken. "If there's nothing unusual, we can all attack." In an instant, even if the attack plan had not been notified to the entire Void front line, there was already a vague and frightening storm of order that was gathering wildly. We could not hold it in and had prematurely unleashed his power. After waiting for 2 hours for the order to attack, he was as excited as a child with a lifespan of several eras. Hui excitedly leaped onto the city wall and spread his arms wide. A roar that contained 100 years of phlegm instantly spread across the entire Void front line through all soul transmissions. In the name of the divine realm, in the name of order, everyone bring out the best mental state you can bring out in your life. Flatten this part of the Void for me. Confirm the orders issued by Lord Maple and Lord Hui. Immediately launch an all-out attack on the abyssal death shroud. Send word to all Void frontline troops. Immediately launch an all-out attack on the abyssal death shroud. Receive the orders from the 2 divine titles of the divine realm. Unmistakable. Little ones, it's time to go to the battlefield. Whoever dares to fall prematurely before cutting down a piece of land, I will drag your soul up and continue to beat you up. Frontline troops are ready. Damn it. I've been holding back for 100 million years. After 100 million years of beating, I can finally get back at them. The order forces stationed at the rear have confirmed the order to attack. They will jump into the battlefield 20 minutes after the start of the battle. Allies, please provide a safe coordinate. We have a large amount of flammable and explosive items here. The moment we jump over, we'll blow them up. If you don't want to get involved, remember to throw a coordinate to us and quickly retreat. We've already set it 20 minutes in advance. Blade, come. Where's my blade? Brothers, kill them all. Following Huey's shout, the entire front line of the Void boiled over. It was really boiling over. Through the soul communication, there are all kinds of second-level messages, third-level messages, fourth-level, fifth-level messages. Hundreds of messages were all strung together. In an instant, it was impossible to tell who was talking. In any case, there was a buzzing sound in his mind, and he almost lost consciousness. Yin Nuoxing had already shut down half of the soul communication when Hui was holding his breath. Even so, there was still a lot of noise, and the various contents made him feel, well, fortunately, he had been on alert since yesterday and had gathered his forces to prepare for an all-out war. At this moment, all the forces at the front line of the Void were in a state of readiness, including some of the troops who were said to be in charge of the rear attack and so on. They had already prepared in advance, which saved him the time to assemble. Yin Nuoxing waved her hand again. All members of the divine realm, prepare all levels of energy towers. From the beginning, enter into an overload state and increase the lethality to the highest level. Leave only the basic defensive power to guard against possible accidents. For the time being, do not inform the others and let them stay alert. Qing Yu, who had not interjected from beginning to end, could not help but sigh. There's too little time. I don't think young Master Shun and the others have time to prepare. Yin Nuoxing could not help but smile bitterly. When she came with Min, she had just gone to a place on the way. She did not expect that Hui would take her away before she could return to the front line of the void after the operation was over. After all, she was in his spiritual world. Naturally, there was no way she could inform the Divine Shadow and the others. You don't have to go this time, Yin Nuoxing said to Qing Yu, and then glanced at Dao Heaven and the two girls who were sleeping together. She said seriously, "This is a very dangerous operation. We have to go deep into the death mist of the abyss and face fear head-on. It's not the same as the war 100 million years ago. Although they are in chaos and I don't see anything out of the ordinary, there's no guarantee that there won't be any accidents. This time, you two will stay here." Yes, I know. Big brother who loves to worry and play with his life. Dao Heaven sighed and shook his head in annoyance. He walked to Qing Yu's side and dragged her to the side. "Let's go. Let's ignore this idiot." Yin Nuoxing. Why was he stunned? The distance between the front line of the void and the death mist of the abyss was not far. They could see each other with the naked eye in the void. However, counting from the time they left the void blockade, it had been 10 minutes before the army was at the foot of the city. They were face to face, so close that they could use a brick to hit each other's faces without any warning. Although to them, the brick could penetrate the void. Ahem. Anyway, the distance was very close. It was so close that they should have been able to engage in close combat. However, the vast black clouds were howling at a distance of 10,000 feet, flashing with a scarlet radiance that could induce a normal person into a frenzied state. The gigantic storm cloud wall was right in front of their eyes. They could even see the abyssal death mist spawn whizzing past them like it was running a marathon. If it was in the past, when they were at such a distance, the other side should have let the storm cloud wall unleash a wave of energy attack without a word. However, it was really too strange this time. The strange silence and the strange disregard for them calmed them down a little from their frenzied state. The doubts that should have emerged from the bottom of their hearts were suppressed when they saw that their leader, captain, leader, and leader were all calm. Those who could stand at such a distance and face the death mist of the abyss without changing their expressions were all ruthless people who had already thrown life and death to the back of their minds. As long as their leaders were still charging, they would not retreat, even if they had to sacrifice their last drop of blood. It's been a long time. Compared to this, the sudden appearance of the Cloud Continent could not even be considered as a small interlude. Standing in front of the army, Hui opened his arms wide. His face was full of excitement. At this moment, his expression was a little similar to Yin Nuoxing, who was on the verge of madness. However, he still lacked some charm. "Don't be too excited. You'll mess things up." Yin Nuoxing glanced at him indifferently. "I just feel that this trip will be fine for the time being. However, I can't say exactly when the changes will happen. Before that happens, do your best to destroy the death mist of the abyss. Destroy as much as you can. There are many of them, but right now, in the world of order, there's also a very powerful force, confirming that the reaction of order in the area ahead has been reduced to the lowest level. There is no world of order or power of order in the upper, middle, and lower levels of the void. The battlefield should be limited to the void. Everyone, get ready." Standing in front of the death mist of the abyss were densely packed warriors of order. They were all lined up according to their respective formations. The power of order had already been boiling. This time they were really going all out. There was only a small number of backup forces left at the front line of the void. Before they left, they had locked the door and left an escape route. If there was really an emergency at the rear, they could instantly return to defend. However, hopefully, there was no need to use them. More than 95% of the warriors of order were gathered at the distance of 10,000 feet from the death mist of the abyss. They looked straight at the black cloud wall that was flashing with crazy colors. With just a single command, The energy that they had accumulated in their hands would be poured into the space in front of them without reservation. This was the first time in history that they had launched an attack on the death mist of the abyss. If there were no accidents, it should be the only time. This was a chance to achieve the greatest result. Even if they had to pay the price, they would not hesitate. However, Maple, what are you thinking about? Huey's voice came from the side, snapping Yin Nuoshing out of his thoughts. He blinked and sighed. I'm thinking about this stupid thing in the void. I have a feeling that everything seems to have hit the point. The timing is too accurate. It was when I woke up, and it just so happened that the problem happened at that time. Now that you mention it, it is true. Hui nodded and saw that Maple's face was slightly gloomy, as if he was thinking about something. He knew that Maple must be thinking about the so-called foolproof plan. The so-called foolproof plan that could deal with 10,000 unexpected situations in an instant. We couldn't help but walk forward and pat Maple's shoulder. All right, it's necessary to be appropriately worried. We're not stupid enough to set foot here without any preparation. We're all mentally prepared to make this move. Even if the results are very little, it's still a result of a battle. If something happens, we have a way to protect the power of the world of order and retreat. Trust everyone. Well, this is not a matter of trust or not. Forget it. There is no need to think so much now. Yin Nuoshing let out a long breath. His body began to emit a bright light. The origin energy began to vibrate and spread throughout the area. When he opened his eyes again, mottled colors that contained everything surged. His change was like a signal that made everyone behind him take a deep breath. Begin the attack. Chapter 1663. The abnormal movement of the death mist in the abyss did not look like it was going to end anytime soon. Who was the will that suddenly appeared in the death mist in the abyss? What kind of thoughts did it have for it to appear at such a time? That's right, he was still holding on to the idea that it was a conspiracy. Everything was really too coincidental, and it just so happened that it caused a little commotion when he woke up. Coincidental, coincidental, coincidental. This idea was purely because he was scared of being tricked by a certain two groups of people. Now, everything he looked at felt like something was plotting against him. For example, the movement of the death mist in the abyss in front of him. Regardless of whether it was really planned or not, or whether there was really something behind it, he could only withdraw himself from it and ignore what was wrong with it. He had to ignore everything other than something wrong with them. He had to rush up and fight. Take advantage of their weakness to kill them. He did not need to care about the reason behind it. He only needed to rush forward. All troops begin the attack. The order domain will spread out in a circular formation. The vanguard will leave the main force and take the lead to enter the death mist in the abyss to open up a blank domain. The vanguard is already set off. They have begun to make contact with the death mist in the abyss. Give us 5 minutes. No. Only 3 minutes would be enough. Kill. The order core is ready. From now on, we will connect everyone's order power and begin to transmit energy to the energy towers in the celestial realm. First, we will open up the order barrier to stabilize the unformed territory. As Yin Nuoshing's order fell, the order army under the death mist in the abyss quickly began to move. The reports that rang in his soul came from the commanders of various places. They were responsible for managing the larger number of order forces. Most of the commanders of the frontline nodes were warriors of the celestial realm, such as Qing Jun and I Ching. Some of the more outstanding people would also be led by order warriors from other worlds. This did not matter. Most of the time, when the battle reached its climax, Yin Nuoshing and Hui would just swing their arms and hand over the command to others. The two of them would each open up an unparalleled territory and began to harvest the death mist spawns endlessly. The order barrier and the order domain was just a very inconspicuous little in front of the huge wall of dark mist. It was so small that it was like an ant trying to block the advance of the storm with its own strength. If one were to plunge headfirst into it, they would not even be able to make a splash. The vanguard troops had indeed plunged headfirst into it, but at this moment, they were slaughtering in all directions. Majestic energy torrents roared and rolled violently in the clouds, blasting holes in the storm cloud walls everywhere. There were also a few places where the crazy scarlet color was swallowed and dimmed by the order power. Yin Nuashing did not immediately charge in. Instead, he quietly released the origin energy and the power of order. Through the soul seeds of the divine warriors distributed throughout the front line of the void, he spread the power across the entire front line of the void, going deep into the death shroud and monitoring the entire vast battlefield. We glanced at him and knew what he was doing. He took over command of the node, propped up the order domain, and led the large group into the death shroud. They were not in a hurry to act. What they needed to do now was to follow the vanguard troops as the arrowhead. When the vanguard troops had chosen a place as the cornerstone of the order domain, they and the commanders of each node would work together to set up a temporary order domain. Then, with that domain as the epicenter, they would begin their slaughter. As for the other troops with special duties, such as the one who had said that they would enter the battlefield 20 minutes later with a greater force, it would be a clean-up assault after the battlefield had stabilized. 20 minutes was originally the time for the expansive order domain to completely stabilize. Although it might take less time this time, the difference of a few minutes did not matter, and there was no need for immediate adjustments. Either way, the Death Shroud should not have caused enough commotion for them to be so flustered that they had to immediately call for reinforcements. Boom! Energy that was wrapped in order and rules blasted out from the Death Shroud. Half of the cloud wall before them was shattered by the shockwave that spread out in the void. Most of it was destroyed by pure power and disappeared into nothingness. Those abyssal Death Shroud spawns also disappeared without a sound. Every time a large hole was blasted out of the Death Shroud, countless spawns would be reduced to ashes, while the remaining spawns would desperately try to fill up the hole. The spawns would also continue to turn into a wave and surge forward, completely ignoring the group of uninvited guests who had intruded into their territory. Eerie silence. Eerie lack of attack. The Death Shroud was so eerie that it was a little abnormal. Everyone saw with their own eyes that a large hole was blasted out of the Death Shroud wave by the Rule's destruction attack. Then, the hole would be filled up by the spawns that swarmed in from the rear. Then, the hole would be blasted open in the next moment and filled up again. The cycle repeated itself, as if they were constantly sending themselves to their deaths without any intention of retaliating. Thinking about how the Death Shroud spasmed for the entire day yesterday, everyone more or less understood something. However, the commander did not allow them to move freely. Perhaps he had his own considerations. For the time being, they would advance steadily. There was no rush. They could not rush. The landing point has been cleared. Core, quickly bring the order core over. The basic order domain is ready. All energy towers, release a sweeping attack at a fixed point. Clear the Death Shroud around the landing point and suppress the enemy's counterattack. Everyone looked at the Death Shroud in front of them that was being suppressed and had no intention of retaliating. They could not help but smile bitterly. Where did the counterattack come from? Well, they were just teasing it in their hearts. When it was time to fight, they would still fight seriously. Thousands of energy towers that came along with the army resonated with the energy crystals. Streaks of energy torrents that were hundreds of miles wide pierced through the void and blasted towards a single point within the abyssal Death Shroud, as if they were focused. The ring-shaped shockwaves that kept spreading shattered all the abyssal Death Shroud that came close. The space before their eyes suddenly opened up as the fog dissipated. At the point where the thousands of energy torrents were focused, everyone saw a spot where pure white light shone. The vanguard had opened up a blank and unstable node that was half inclined towards order. Once the core of order was in place, their first step would be secured. We wave his hand. Push forward steadily. Echelons at all levels, cross-attack, and maintain energy suppression. Don't give them a chance to raise their heads. Send the core. Yin Nuashing suddenly opened her eyes. Her colorful eyes flashed gently. The first echelon and the vanguard troops open the order barrier. The first wave of Death Shroud is coming. The rest of you assist the energy towers for the second wave of sweeping. Everyone's expression instantly became serious. It's here. After being beaten like a wooden stake for a few minutes, the enemy's counterattack had finally arrived. Before their eyes could catch anything out of the ordinary, their senses told everyone that there was a destructive energy that reminded them of 100 million years ago bursting out right in front of them. As soon as the realm of order opened up, there were several energy torrents that resembled a distorted galaxy sweeping out from the front along with the rumbling of the void. At the same time, they attacked the barrier of the vanguard and the first echelon in front, causing the latter to flicker violently. Just as the two parties were about to gradually strengthen their defenses, the hundreds of abyssal death shroud of unknown origin suddenly disappeared. It only lasted for a few seconds before it dissipated into the void and nothingness. It was quite sudden. Attack with all your might. Everyone's roars and roars, accompanied by the buzzing of the energy towers, resounded through the void. Millions of energy attacks transformed into all sorts of attack forms and whizzed forward, tearing apart the void and causing a series of huge energy explosions in the domain of the abyssal death mist. Millions of energy balls exploded out of thin air, throwing the abyssal death mist and its manifestations into the void. This level of counterattack is considered twitch, right? We scratched his head. The attack came quickly and disappeared even more suddenly. He was ready to set up the guardian barrier to save everyone's energy. The energy that had just been gathered could not be used anymore. Phone, what's the situation at the back? It's unimpeded for now. Hui nodded. Take them down. After the order was given, Yin Washing slowly closed her eyes and said, the death shroud is still in a highly active state. A huge amount of energy is gathering everywhere, but the intention to attack only appeared for a moment. Perhaps, as you said, it twitched a little. It seems that defensive preparations are still quite necessary. We looked at the battlefield. After a few rounds of saturated energy bombardment, the area around the landing point was as empty as it could be. The vanguard even had the time to set the rules of order on the newborn domain. The core was already in place. They just had to wait for it to stabilize and connect the order power connected to the void frontline with the domain here. Then, the first step would be complete. Well, it was not a problem to say that they had landed. If they could twitch once, there would naturally be a second. Judging from the speed of their attack just now, even if they appeared in an instant, there would still be time to react. Moreover, that level of attack is too weak and will not affect us for the time being, Hui said as he looked at Yin Nuashing. So, do you want to rest for a while? Isn't it too much for one person to link the entire void frontline? With the origin energy and everyone's soul seeds, it's not a big problem for the time being. Yin Nuashing shook her head. We could not tell if what she said was true from the faint expression on her face. As long as we have a firm foothold, the spreading domain of order will stabilize, and I won't need to monitor the entire situation. Then let's speed up a little. The earlier we can stabilize the situation, the more relieved we will be. Hui nodded. The spreading domain of order, in simple terms, was that the domain of order formed by the core could continuously devour and assimilate the energy of the abyssal death shroud, polluting and distorting it into order power. After that, it would expand its own domain bit by bit, providing them with a safe foothold. After the landing point had stabilized, it could also convert the power of the void and nothingness into order power to fill the space. It was recovering while fighting, absorbing your power and turning into my own power, and then using it to hit myself. This was essentially the same as the abyssal death shroud devouring their order power. However, it was the other way around, using order to devour non-order. The core of order has been lit up. From now on, 1/3 of the energy towers will enter auxiliary spreading mode. The rest of you will clear the abyssal death shroud at noon so that they can spread the domain of order smoothly. Try to get a large enough domain. If the domain is large enough, we can fight however we want. While the abyssal death shroud was still twitching and had yet to recover, they recklessly unleashed their own power so that the domain of order would be sufficient and spread out without any hindrance. They would imprint their own mark on the empty domain and the domain of the abyssal death shroud. Everything within the range would belong to order and be converted into order power. Amidst the eruption of energy flames all over the sky, there was a spot of white light that was rolling violently. It was constantly expanding and expanding its power. When it had accumulated to a certain extent, the white light suddenly collapsed towards the center. After that, a surge of order power in the opposite direction suddenly burst out from the center, spreading the power of order into the domain of the abyssal death shroud. The domain formed by the core is beginning to expand. This is the first time I've seen such a reaction in the domain of the abyssal death shroud. We saw that the white light had expanded hundreds of times in an instant. After a moment, he swung his long hair and smiled coolly. He took out the guardian shield and smashed it into the void. This is the domain of the realm of the gods. With him as the point of origin, a golden energy halo suddenly exploded, covering the rapidly expanding white light, causing the speed of its expansion to increase exponentially. In just 1 minute, it had already reached the side of the Order warrior who was clearing out the surrounding territories. Then, it collided head-on with the abyssal death mist, and the power of order and non-order began to collide with each other with all their might. Speed up, clearing the abyssal death shroud in the domain, and let the domain of order continue to expand. Continue to expand. Brother, Hui Jun, I'm late. I finally made it. As soon as Hui shouted, he saw a group of people flashing. It was Jing Yun who had brought the group of people from their world here. The latter was holding a small shrine that was only half a foot tall. Hui recognized that it was the Shrine of Origins and could not help but be stunned. You brought the Shrine of Origins here? Huh. After all, I'm not used to this level of cleaning without bringing the origin node. Jing Yun laughed loudly and waved her hand to let the Shrine of Origins in her hand drift toward the white core of the order domain. The moment the latter was touched, it was replaced by a stronger and more advanced order power, accompanied by a weak mottled energy that replaced the pure white light. Then, a ray of light flashed, and an ancient shrine that was thousands of feet tall suddenly appeared. It was overflowing with a holy aura, and the origin energy was rolling endlessly. It suddenly appeared in the domain of the abyssal death shroud. Just the surging holy aura alone made everyone's aura soar. It's just that the speed of gathering the nodes is a little slow. We're almost half an hour late. Replacing it with a higher level of half-order and half-origin domain, the overflowing energy made the power of the barrier many times greater. Under the shining light, the abyssal death shroud collapsed upon contact, pushing this new domain to a further place. We looked directly at the place where the Shrine of Origins was located. He seemed to see the shrine taking root in the void. It was a root formed by energy, and it was taking root in the void and nothingness. The speed at which it mobilized energy was many times faster than the speed of the order core they created. This is a good thing, right? This is one of the legacies of the heavenly god of origins. Jing Yin could not help but laugh when she saw Huey's shocked expression. Mentioning this reminded her of something she almost forgot. She hurriedly said to the young man, "Young man, the other shrines of origins may need your help to activate. Except for the one in front of you, the other origin nodes are a little damaged. If they are not activated, the origin energy there's only a little stronger than the order core you guys created." Okay, Yin Nuashing nodded. His senses spread across the entire battlefront and found the shrines of origins. There were not many of them. There were only 200 or 300 shrines of origins. Wait a minute, he counted. There were a total of 306 shrines of origins, and most of them were more than 50% damaged. There was one that only had a core, a few pillars, and a wall left. It was so damaged that one could not even tell what the shrine looked like. That was just a wall. Even so, as long as the core was still there, it could be restored. It would only take a little bit of time. The will and energy that spread across the battlefront surged towards the 306 shrines of origins through the warriors of the celestial realm who had turned into nodes. The origin energy instantly became very active when it came into contact with the shrines of origins. Everyone who was guarding the place was stunned for a moment. Before they could react to what was happening, they saw a white light flashing in front of them. A shrine, a transparent skeleton, appeared in front of everyone's eyes. After that, the power of order and the void in the vicinity quickly surged towards the transparent shrine, gradually turning it into a solid form in the domain of order. Along with it, there was a vast presence that had existed since ancient times. Although they did not know what it was, it looked very powerful. When its energy flowed past, there was an inexplicable surge of power in their hearts. Suddenly, they had the strength to fight. Everyone was talking in their hearts. We scratched his head. Feng won't force himself too much, right? Not for the time being. Jingyan looked at the young man who had his eyes closed. His pure white hair had unwittingly lengthened, dancing wildly in the void despite the absence of wind. He was observing the flow of the young man's origin energy. Being able to link the entire void front line through the soul seed and almost 100,000 nodes without the soul collapsing means that there's no problem at all. Moreover, you only need to touch the core of the shrines of origins and activate it. It doesn't take too much power. Under normal circumstances, you might have to activate the shrines one by one, but in this case, the core would rapidly repair itself when expanding the domain, which is much more convenient. Still, I wonder if you would run into something this time. Jingyan suddenly laughed and said something that almost made Hui spit out a mouthful of water. He could not help covering his face, and smiled bitterly as he looked at Feng, who had his eyes closed and was motionless. The guy wouldn't simply close his eyes and never open them again, would he? Suddenly coming into contact with 200 or 300 relics of origins and being sure that there was something related to them, wouldn't Feng scare me to death? Lord Hui, I've sensed unusual movements from the abyssal death mist spawn, and it's rapidly approaching us, as well as a direct attack from the abyssal death mist. Hui turned to see that the domain of origin and order had suddenly flashed, and a violent flash of energy interrupted his guess about Feng's current state of mind. My goodness, he's really starting to twitch, but it seems that it's only a part of it. The abyssal death mist spawn was still surging endlessly, but at this moment, about 1/10 of them had suddenly left the main group without warning, turning around and charging towards the group of uninvited guests. Streaks of aura that was several times more frenzied than usual rushed towards their faces, and were sent flying by the expanding domain, dissipating into a cluster of energy. Everyone, this was an instant death. They had never thought that the abyssal death mist manifestation could die in such a way. It was a little too tragic for him to die by smashing his head into the expanding domain or whatever. That's a domain and barrier of the same origin as the origin heavenly god's power. Although it hasn't been fully developed to its limit, it's not something you ants can resist. It's something used to deal with the absolute power of chaos. Jingyan laughed and waved to the group behind him. Let's go. We've rested for a while, it's time to move. Kill. We turned around and they were gone. Then, in the depths of the abyssal death mist far away, streaks of energy that shook the void and nothingness burst out one after another, as if they were free of charge. That movement was a little stronger than Feng's usual state of exertion. As expected of the primeval heavenly god, his application of energy, order, concept, and other powers was definitely much more advanced than theirs. With such power in the first exchange, if Feng didn't have the origin energy and annihilation energy, he probably wouldn't have been as good as Jingyun and the others. Well, now that we're still on the battlefield, Hui didn't want to sigh. He looked for the soul seed and quickly gave his orders. All energy towers, switch to the form of the support core spreading domain. All units, reserve part of your power for saturation attacks, and continue to sweep away all the abyssal death mist within sight. Remember, don't rush out of the domain, just move forward with the spreading domain. There's still a group of restless guys waiting behind. They're entering the battlefield in 3 minutes. Some of the abyssal death shroud and spawns within their range of vision were showing signs of resistance. After being beaten for a dozen minutes in vain, they had finally activated their instinctive reaction to defend themselves. However, their numbers were still limited, probably because that was still restraining them. Even so, the abyssal death shroud's energy surged violently outside. It was still very intense in terms of sight, and even 1/10 of its power was a considerable amount of resistance. The expanding domain hence slowed down its rate of expansion as it received the baptism of the abyssal death shroud with its barrier. Circles of massive ripples churned over the domain's barrier, pinching the spot where the energy was bursting at a distance of over 10 million miles. Therefore, even 1/10 of its power was a considerable amount of resistance. After all, this was their main lair, and they were uninvited guests who barged in. One could imagine the pressure they had to face, and it was only when they were not in their right mind that they could charge in recklessly. If it was during normal times, forget it. It's just half awake. They can't fully awaken, and their resistance is incomplete. It would take some time for them to truly recover part of their power. Yin Nuashing opened her eyes and said to Hui, "Our arrival has stimulated them, and they would hurry to recover their power. Before that, we have to expand our advantage to the maximum." With the domain rooted by the Shrine of Origins, it's not as if we can't hold on to this assault until the end. We paused for a moment and nodded. The real battle was still brewing, and when they or the abyssal death mist came to their senses, that would be when the real war begins. Chapter 1664. Be it a beautiful thought or a daydream, everyone would have their whimsical moments. When things were going well, they would think that it would be great if everything continued to go smoothly. When things were not going well, they would turn around and curse those swarthy creatures, praying that they would soon die and ascend. However, it was just a daydream. No matter what kind of situation caused such a beautiful dream to appear in their hearts, as long as it was a dream, it would come to an end. It was just like how the wind and the water could not always be smooth. Every dog has its day, and that was the most normal thing in this world. However, there was no rule that said that things could not get stuck halfway, right? Taking advantage of the chaos in the abyssal death shroud, they successfully launched their attack, successfully established the domain of order, and successfully built a stronghold in the abyssal death shroud. Then, the abyssal death shroud that was somewhat lacking in intelligence finally exploded from 1/10 of its active power to 1/5. Well, it was at least twice as much power. After all, this was their lair, and the pressure suddenly doubled. That was equivalent to boom. One after another, destructive rumbles exploded wildly around the stabilized domain of order. The sound of indiscriminate bombardment was like the frequency of a rainstorm hitting on an umbrella, echoing incessantly beside their ears. In the blink of an eye, tens of millions of abyssal death shroud spawns were vaporized. Even the abyssal death shroud's true form was constantly retreating under the powerful attack of order. The stormy cloud wall had retreated a lot further than before, and they were even about to leave the domain of the abyssal death shroud. We scratch his head. Well, that's pretty hard work being beaten up. The domain of order had been established, and the general situation that belonged to the initial stage had been set. Just as Maple had said, under the blessing of the Holy Temple of Origins, order was mixed with weak origin energy, greatly increasing the power of order. He felt that even if the abyssal death shroud were to go on a rampage, they would be able to repel it. It was not that he was feeling good about himself, but the power that was erupting now was definitely enough to push the abyssal death shroud back. Maple had not made a move yet, and Jing Yun and the others had not made a move yet. Hui was also quietly observing, and the other places on the front line were probably the same. The abyssal death mist has begun to retreat. Everyone advanced together with the order domain. Let the power of order continue to advance steadily. The vanguard troops should not rush too quickly. You're still a bit away from the order domain. Take advantage while you're down was a skill that everyone had leveled to the highest level. Hence, they had completely given up on defending and focused all their energy on attacking. The commotion that had erupted around them was precisely because of this. Hui shook his head helplessly and looked at Maple, who was floating at the side like a wandering soul. Maple, do you want to expand the realm of order a little more? There's no need for that. Just gradually strengthen the power of the domain. The current size of the domain is just right. If we want to expand it further, we'll have to wait until the next stage. Yin Nuashing shook her head. The power that they had now was actually enough. Although they wanted to maximize the results of the battle, they could not be too rash. If a group of people were charging at the front while the rest were chasing from the back and forcefully pulling the battle line, it was not advisable to be too rash. The abyssal death mist would eventually recover, and it would only take a second for it to make the best choice to counter their attacks. By then, it would be too late to rearrange the formation. Even if they used brute force to break through the encirclement, that short moment of disruption would have left some hidden dangers in the long-term battle. In such a place, it would be difficult to have the opportunity to correct the accumulated mistakes. This was also the reason why their group of top forces had not yet made a move. Once they made a move, the entire battlefield would change, and everyone's battle would change. For now, they did not need to use this kind of power. Now, all they needed to do was to push forward steadily. The speed of their advance was already enough to injure the abyssal death mist. Every second they pushed forward, every second they held on was worth it. 1/5 of the abyssal death mist was moving, and more power was gradually gathering. However, that was only 1/5 of the power of the abyssal death mist at the back. It could be seen that a huge living body was gradually making 1/5 of its body function come alive. Due to its huge size, it would take a lot of time just to mobilize it. This time difference was enough for them to do a lot of things. We was only worried about when the next strengthening would be. As they gradually moved forward, the abyssal death mist would be stimulated more and more, and the overall struggle of the abyssal death mist would become louder. He only hoped that the influence of the will would exist for a while longer. The influence of that will is gradually decreasing. The little angel whispered in Yun Nuashing's soul, not letting anyone else know. It seems that not only is it affected by your attacks, but the will itself is also gradually becoming less active. When the two controlling powers of the abyssal death fog are equal, it may enter the stage of confrontation. In other words, that will's absolute control has begun to slip. Once its influence gradually disappears, the abyssal death mist will once again be under control. Yun Nuashing muttered, and looked at the little angel in the spiritual world. Are you all right? I'm fine. The influence of that will has decreased, and I'm much more comfortable here. The little angel nodded. But the influence is still there. As long as it doesn't spread out of your soul, there won't be any more serious impact. Yin Nuashing nodded and focused on the battlefield and the void before them. The situation has not entered the countdown state so quickly, but the preparatory signal has been sent out, and now is the best time to continue to expand the victory. No, it should be said that the only time left is now. Advance prematurely, perhaps a little too prematurely, but still have to be careful. And when we accelerate, we have to give the realm of order more opportunity to expand and consolidate. Announce to the entire front line of the void. From this moment onwards, the vanguard and all units of the fourth echelon and below will focus on strengthening and expanding the realm of order. Warriors of the divine realm, follow the three echelons and attack with full force. Most of the time, it was rare for a commander to issue an order to the entire army. At this moment, an order that they had not received for a long time stunned everyone. Although they did not understand it deep down, they did not show it. In the blink of an eye, innumerable voices and shadows brushed past each other. Every unit made minor adjustments based on their own conditions, and everything was completed in an orderly manner. The vanguard and the others took over the baton to consolidate the realm of order, while the first echelon and the warriors of the divine realm raised the banner of slaughter. A combined momentum that was hundreds of thousands of times more powerful than before burst out, once again clearing the battlefield. From now on, the observers will withdraw their surveillance of the entire battlefield. All nodes and units will enter a state of alert and be wary of any changes in the abyssal death mist. Over. Yin Nuoxing raised his head, and his long hair slowly retracted. His senses that were spread across the entire front line through his soul were also withdrawn. The world of his senses shrunk from most of the void to only the void region in front of him. He slowly opened his eyes, and a magnificent aura slowly surged out of his body, turning into clouds that spread out in circles. Feng, why are you suddenly planning to go on a killing spree? Hui hurriedly floated to Yin Nuoxing's side and saw that he was activating the origin energy to prepare for a big fight. His eyes flashed, and he said in his soul, "Is there a change in the abyssal death mist?" "Not yet, but it will be soon." The girl said that the influence of the will is gradually decreasing as we advance. Its own will is weakening, and the underworld is probably struggling to regain control of the abyssal death mist. It's not a big problem now, but after a while, the abyssal death mist will enter a state of chaos. However, it will probably be a one-sided situation. It will obviously just stop the abyssal death mist for a while and didn't do anything to it. It will probably be suppressed soon. When this phase is over, we will have to confront the abyssal death mist head-on. It sounds like there's still some time, but I understand. After watching for so long, it's time to move. Hui nodded in understanding, then waved his hand and shouted to his people, "Everyone make way. The tyrant is about to make a move. Those who don't want to be caught in the crossfire, quickly make way for the middle and go to the side to fight." Everyone who had just exchanged glances and completed the job exchange was stunned when they heard this, and they looked at Yin Nuoxing in horror. The next moment, the first, second, and third echelons, as well as the warriors of the celestial realm, covered their heads and ran away like rats, making way for the middle. Jingyan also screamed and dragged her people away. Yin Nuoxing, why is everyone evacuating and making way as if a typhoon is passing through? How skilled are you people? Is there a set of professional evacuation training for his appearance? Forget it. I don't care about this bunch of useless people. It's going to be a big movement. Be careful. Don't use too much strength. Oh, it's too late. Maple rushed up and activated a set of 10,000 formations at the same time, lighting up the entire void. The void in front of them was so bright that it seemed as if there was an infinite amount of energy gathering, as if a new world was about to be born in front of them. Then there was a surging shockwave in the void. This void is really bright. I'm afraid that a large part of the void's rules have been destroyed. Phew, this movement is really big. Every time I see the scene of little brother fighting, it's so shocking. Jing Yun, who was leading her people back to the realm of order, turned back and saw the scene of a vast sea of light spreading out, and the wind of the void blowing in their faces messed up everyone's hair. It's even more shocking than before. As expected of the origin energy, I can feel the scene of that battle again. Huey's head popped out from behind the Guardian's shield, and he couldn't help but say, "Are you surprised too? I thought that no matter how exaggerated a battle at this level is, it wouldn't surprise you who are originally primeval gods." Well, after all, this kind of scene is rare in the primeval realm. Not everyone would deliberately use such a wide area attack to attack the enemy, especially. Jingyan paused and looked at Yin Nuoxing. The number of formations around her had increased to 1,000,000, and the void was still shaking. More and more formations were emerging, treating the wide area attack as a normal attack. We couldn't help but laugh dryly. Well, that's the situation after all. Usually, when fighting with an enemy of the same level and quality, most people would compress their strength and energy to the extreme to use attacks that could break through the limit. However, Maple was different. No matter who he fought, he would cause a huge commotion, especially when the more powerful the enemy, the bigger the commotion. That was caused by him compressing his energy to the extreme and breaking through the limit without any limit. Unless he officially became the primeval god, the commotion would only get bigger and bigger. However, we felt that even if he became the heavenly god of primordial beginning, the commotion would not be too small. It might even be bigger. It just looked like nothing much, but then with a bang, the whole world would be buried. Just thinking about it made his liver tremble. Anyway, the scene in front of them was more or less like that. It scared the people in echelons 1, 2, 3, and so on 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 and so on. Probably because the commotion caused by Maple was too big, we suddenly looked up into the distance when everyone was strengthening the realm of order. Dark and blood-red clouds were gathering rapidly. They were very familiar with that commotion. Inform everyone that we have observed the gathering of the power of the abyssal death shroud. Beware of uninvited guests. Beware. Everyone looked at the gathering of clouds and clouds. That was indeed the commotion caused by the abyssal death shroud. It was probably the reinforcements from the inside that had finally arrived after a long journey. After all, that was a huge thing that occupied the entire lower plane. Even if only 1/5 of its power could be mobilized, as long as it was mobilized, it would be like water in a sponge. It could be squeezed out no matter how hard it was squeezed. However, all things lead to the void and the origin of the stars. At the same time, when Hui made the announcement, Yin Nuoxing also made a move. Before the abyssal death shroud was in place, she raised her hand and threw out a bright star. It created a vast galaxy in the void, which reflected the light of the thousands of magic circles. The void was really bright. We put his palms together and said, I've sinned. Forget it. I don't have to worry about Maple anymore. Let him mess around by himself. After the initial period of madness, he will be fine. Anyway, he knows in his heart that he can judge the situation well. He knows when to mess around and when to restrain himself. We suddenly remembered that Maple had mentioned before that he wanted to try out a new form after waking up this time. He turned his head and looked at the void that was filled with endless energy explosions and energy anomalies. He could not help but blush. This guy is obviously testing his new power. No wonder he made such a big commotion. If he did not mess around a little, how would he know where his limit is? Right now, the expansion of the realm of order is almost the same as the speed of consolidation. With this level of consolidation, it should not be too big of a problem to deal with the abyssal death shroud. Jingyan touched her chin and muttered, Are you worried about encountering a special type? Or the heavenly god of the underworld? Both, I guess. Jingyan nodded. The second is the most important. If it is up against the heavenly god of the origin, this realm of order is too fragile. It can be pulled out without much effort. Although the existence of the origin sanctum can strengthen this realm of order to a level that is beyond the reach of ordinary means, the origin energy and the origin law are still too little. There is no way to release its complete form. It can only support the realm of order to slowly grow like it is now. We suddenly thought of a question. Speaking of which, the things related to the heavenly god of origin are not affected by the tide of chaos. After all, it is the things of the heavenly god of origin and the others. It contains their power. Not to say that it is equivalent to their own existence, but the tide of chaos will not easily wash away and fade the things left behind by the heavenly god of origin and the others. As Jingyan said, her gaze looked ahead through the place covered by Yun Nuoxing's energy flames. Suddenly, she was stunned. There is an energy source point in the abyssal death shroud. We did not react, but Jing Yuanji was slightly stunned. You remember now? Didn't you not remember the last time? Yes, when I came here, I used the power of order to rummage through my memory and soul for a long time. I managed to salvage a lot of memories and cognition, but they were all fragmented fragments. I barely pieced together some things based on my memories and cognition. Otherwise, I would not have been able to tell you so many things these days. Most of them are not particularly complete. Jingyan nodded and said, By the way, the influence of the tide of chaos is a bit like erasing, covering, and clearing. So theoretically, there will be some clues left behind. It can't completely clear these things. Perhaps there are such traces left behind in this world, but none of us know. Let's not talk about that first. The energy source point is a name given by the heavenly god of origin and the others. It actually refers to a kind of phenomenon, the void. Whether it is the void of order or the void of chaos, such things exist. In the empty void, suddenly there's a stable release of all kinds of energy, rules, order, and information. It has a relatively complete self-constructed rules, a point or a region, but since it is called an energy source point, we are used to calling it a point. Anyway, in the void, size, and whatnot. As long as you understand what I mean. I understand. We nodded. Then what is the use of this energy source point? Well, it's actually hard to say. Jingyan stroked her chin and shook her head. The true form of the energy source point is unknown. It is directly formed in the void. However, it could also be formed by something collapsing after being destroyed. Its true form could be a spring, constantly spewing out energy, rules, and order. It could also be a cradle that is nurturing something. It could also be a world of light, or some other second-tier void spawn. In short, there are all kinds of strange things. Because there are too many situations, and there's basically no way to see through the energy source point, I can't tell you what it is for. Hui heard that and slapped his palm. Got it. It's just a random probability thing. Well, it's something of the void after all. Probability and whatnot are just like that. There are infinite possibilities and infinite impossibilities. Jingyan grinned bitterly. Playing probability with the void was simply courting death. This place had no integrity to speak of. The void did not have the concept of integrity in the first place. Everything that happened or did not happen was a random arrangement, a random lottery, and a random lucky event would happen in a random place. Therefore, the energy source point that was born in the void, apart from its own structure and rules that were determined and the few things that appeared on the surface, everything else was very random. It was like a random box, randomly opening. He could no longer recognize the word random. This energy source point might have been in this void region in the first place, but the abyssal death shroud just happened to spread over and covered it. Jingyan said. Hui quickly shook his head in response. No. This region was previously our lost territory. We never received any information that there was a mysterious spring here, and I think it should have been in the last few dozen million years. Jing Yuanji, when was the last time we executed a defensive encirclement? Lord Hui, that was 20 million years ago, Jing Yuanji said respectfully. Jing Yuanji said respectfully. Furthermore, we did not hear of anything unusual happening in the void during that period. Even in the midst of battle, the Order Void never stopped exchanging information, so we did not receive any such information. That's not right. Lord Feng and I were guarding this place, and we did not see the appearance of the energy source. Therefore, at least before the retreat 20 million years ago, the energy source should not have existed. A new energy source point, huh? Jingyan stroked her chin and suddenly snapped her fingers. All right, Hui Jun, let's attack that place and take down the energy source point. If the Abyssal Death Shroud really used that energy source point, as long as we take control of it, the Abyssal Death Shroud in this area would quickly lose its support and retreat. We can also use the energy source point to strengthen the realm of order. It can be used. Huey's voice rang after Jingyan's voice. I just took a look. There's a large group of Abyssal Death Shroud spawns guarding the energy source point. About 70% of the Abyssal Death Shroud spawns nearby are gathered there, but his gaze drifted towards Feng, who was showing off his prowess over there. Jingyan also looked over in realization. Just let the lad attack. One energy cleansing should be enough to take it down. Even if we don't take it down, the Abyssal Death Shroud will be able to continuously recover its power through the energy source point. Instead of destroying it, why not let us use it ourselves? With that energy source point, we should be able to expand the energy and range of the realm of order by 2 or 3 times. That's it. Feng, you must be listening over here. I'll leave that place to you. Yun Nuoxing and the billions of formations froze, while the stars in the void shuddered. He could not help but roll his eyes, cleansing the ground. He was just planning to push through and leave nothing behind. And now he had to control his power? But The abyssal death mist spawn have surrounded that area with 30 layers and 300 layers. The layers are stacked on top of each other like a 1,000-layer pancake. My 10,000 resonating formations will at most leave you with a pile of dregs. You can't slow down now. Is there a way to satisfy both sides? As Yun Nuashing muttered, Jing Yun and Hui were trying to think of a way when the former suddenly had an idea. I have an idea, Hui. I'll open a path for you. You just have to rush in and find the energy source point to support the guardian barrier. I'll just blast it down. Hui. Chapter 1665. The abyssal death shroud had occupied a very large area of the void. There were no signs of life left in the lower plane of the order void. The aura of destruction left behind by the abyssal death shroud could almost fill up the entire void. As for what the chaotic void was like, no one knew. It had been a few eras since anyone set foot there. Since the abyssal death shroud had sealed off the lower plane, very few beings of order had set foot in the chaotic void. Occupying such a vast area of the void, the abyssal death shroud could do whatever it wanted with the void. Other than not being able to reverse the order of the void, there was no way to modify it. God knows what the underworld had gained from occupying such a large area of the void over the past 10 eras, and what they had learned from it. Just occupying such a large area of the void of order was enough to do a lot of things. Hui had such a thought when he saw the existence of the energy source. From the very beginning, the underworld had been using the power of order to deal with the world of order. Who knows how many similar energy sources there were? He remembered the weird, distorted creations left behind by the underworld and the void. Those weird things that were born from the distortion of the world of light. Until now, they were not sure if it was really as they thought, a cradle that gave birth to the abyssal death shroud. Perhaps they could find something from this energy source. It had obviously been assimilated by the abyssal death shroud. Please don't learn from me. When you're nervous, your mind is full of nonsense. It's all transmitted to me. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. Can you do it or not? Humph. A man can't say he can't. Then you should go. I'm going to crash into that place in 2 minutes. Can't you see that I'm preparing myself? Hui smiled bitterly. His face was full of bitterness. But at this moment, Jing Yun had a heroic expression hanging on her face in front of the human background. That gaze, that expression, that was simply looking at him with an expression of sending him on his way. Right? Damn it. Opening the guardian barrier and taking on Maple's 10,000 formations at once. Just thinking about it made him tremble all over. Who knew what this violent void number 1 would become after being transformed by the primal chaos and the origin energy? Right now, he looked like he was just using his normal strength to blind him. He felt that Maple must have held a deep grudge against him, which was why he proposed such a plan that could deal with him as well. That part of the abyssal death shroud spawn clearly had no intention of leaving the nest. They were piling up their massive bodies to form a wall of life, using their own characteristics to continuously condense the surrounding abyssal death shroud into a thick fortress, as if intending to fight to the death. That was a good sign. Seeing how much they cared about that energy source, he was even more motivated to snatch it over. But was there really no other way? Perhaps because Hui had been standing at the edge of the realm of order for too long. Yin Nuashing sighed helplessly and shook her head. We're using the origin energy, the power of order. Even if I accidentally graze a layer of it, the most I can do is to polish your guardian barrier. What are you afraid of? Hui took a deep breath. Isn't it because you're making too much of a ruckus? Forget it. It's really a waste of time if we keep wasting time. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh. The flickering energy radiance over her body gradually dimmed a little. Countless energy threads thinner than hair appeared over her body. Those were the chains of order that were connected to the energy array that she had painstakingly erected, used to speed up the energy flow between her body and the array. It was one of the secrets that allowed her to control such a large array of arrays at will and precisely control every single one of them without any delay. The only drawback was that the number of arrays she could pull out at one time was limited. For example, she could only pull out a dozen arrays at once. That would be the extent of hundreds of thousands of arrays. The tens of thousands of arrays before her were all stacked up little by little. However, if she was simply using 10,000 arrays at once, there was no need for that kind of control. She only needed to pull out all the arrays in one go and throw them at the enemy's face. The only drawback was that it would be a little energy-consuming, and there would definitely be a lot of attacks that would be ineffective. They were just a bunch of cannon fodders. Repeatedly using 10,000 arrays at once was too much of a compliment. I'll go with you. All right, you wishy-washy guy. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh. The chains of order emitted a light that cast a sea of light. Just as he was about to cut off the chains of order, Hui suddenly shouted, Don't. Just continue to fight. I'll go now. Hui waved his hand, sweating profusely. The array had been set up for so long. If it was cut off because of him, it would take a lot of effort to set up the array again. Well, think on the bright side. Isn't it just blocking one attack from the little brother? You won't die. Jingyan patted Huey's shoulder and comforted him. Look at the degree of madness that the abyssal death mist has gathered. They must have done something shameful with that energy source. Maybe we can get a glimpse of the truth of the abyssal death mist or something by snatching it. There will definitely be countless benefits if we can get our hands on it. Come with me. I'll let you experience firsthand what is called the firepower of an ally. We glanced at him and grabbed his arm. The divine energy turned into a golden light that wrapped around the two of them and suddenly rushed out. In the golden light, everyone vaguely heard a long cry and wail. Thinking of what was going to happen next, everyone silently put their palms together and hoped that they could come back in one piece. Yin Nuashing looked at the two of them rushing out while wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. He couldn't help but sigh. Finally, we're going. I thought that we would really have to press down on the backup plan that was brewing. It's going to waste a lot of time. Well, 2 minutes shouldn't be enough for Hui and the others to do what they want. Then let's slow down a little. Yin Nuashing waved his hand, and the innumerable circles before them spun together and changed the direction of the center of the circle, leaving only one circle that was still locked on to the front. Moments later, the circle that was pointing towards all directions shone together with the innumerable energy stars, pouring torrential energy in all directions. It was an attack that did not give the enemy any time to breathe. It was as if there were streaks of aurora streaking past before their eyes like raindrops in a storm. Each streak of energy precisely destroyed the abyssal death mist until nothing was left. There was almost no wasted energy. Endless radiance flashed, and billions of energies rumbled. The radiance flared, and the dazzling scene before them was as if an army of myths was fighting here. Echelons 1, 2, 3, and so on. Well, after watching for a while, they decided to leave some of them behind while the others went to strengthen the domain of order. Staying at the edge of the domain of order and waiting for battle, that was not going to happen. Now that Lord Maple was going on a killing spree, those circles that were close to 100 million were unleashing boundless energy blasts from all directions. There was no space for them to fight, and if they went out, they would only be accidentally injured by Lord Maple's energy. Although they had rushed out, the thick barrier in front of them wasn't just for show. They estimated that they would need to gather more than a dozen energy towers and aim at the barrier for a while before they could break it. How long would it take for Maple to break it? I can feel signs that the energy belonging to the energy source is being mobilized. They should be mobilizing that energy source to strengthen their own defenses and strengthen the abyssal death mist. However, from the signs of the energy leaking, the technique is quite crude. It's just pure energy mobilization. Jing Yun said, "It seems that even the underworld doesn't know how to use the energy source." That's right. It was already quite late when they discovered this thing. They probably didn't have the time to pay attention to it. Didn't the energy source exist from the beginning? We felt that there was something more to it and asked subconsciously. Jingyan nodded. The conditions of its birth are unknown, but you're right. In the beginning, it did not seem to exist in the void. It suddenly appeared very late in our era. However, I heard the answer given by the heavenly god of origin. What was it again? I don't remember the specifics, but the general idea was that the void is naturally active and has no influence or something like that. Perhaps it was because of some conditions in the void that this thing appeared. Because of what conditions, a common condition that could be drawn with an equal sign at the same time in both eras. He crossed his arms and pondered. A confrontation between order and chaos. I don't really remember, but that might be it. Something that happened in both eras is only a large-scale confrontation between order and chaos. Something that happened on the level of the void. Hui frowned and muttered. In the late period of the previous era, the void of order and the void of chaos were at war. There was no such thing in this era, so it could only be a confrontation between order and void. Could it be that the confrontation between the two forces of order would affect the void? Well, we'll have time to think about those things when the time comes. I'll tidy up my tattered knowledge, and perhaps I'll know more. Anyway, let's deal with the things in front first. Jing Yun reminded him. Hui nodded and shook off those unnecessary thoughts. He looked up ahead, and the sight that his eyes saw was spectacular. The energy from Maple's charge came from behind them. Countless energy torrents surrounded them and flowed forward incessantly. It made him feel like he was in the deep sea, watching countless undercurrents and bubbles streaking past him. Now they were rushing in all directions, indiscriminately bombarding the void and the abyssal death shroud. The shockwaves that splashed up were in the tens of thousands, and each impact was like a tidal wave crashing into the void and the abyssal death shroud, pushing some of the abyssal death shroud back into the void. Under such indiscriminate bombardment, the abyssal death shroud had no power to fight back. Along the way, they were accompanied by rumbling energy and endless flares. Although they were not obstructed, the main show had yet to come. Maple, open a path for us. Move a little to the right. Just as Huey's voice fell, a response rang out in his mind, causing him to stare blankly. He hurriedly pushed Jing Yun to the right, and in the next instant, a vast and mighty multicolored energy current that caused the void and nothingness to tremble together rumbled past a little more than 100 zhang to their left. It was as if a furious dragon of light had streaked across the void, and as it passed through, it was a scene of tremors. The abyssal death mist and manifestations that were close to this area all exploded into clouds and mist out of thin air under the influence of that excessive energy, dissipating without a trace. That energy current also very appropriately disappeared. The fortress in front of them that was surrounded by 300 layers of abyssal death shroud was blasted into a huge hole after being hit by the energy torrent. The energy shock waves from the hole melted the abyssal death shroud and dissipated into clouds and the abyssal death shroud. The abyssal death shroud that was constantly condensing seemed to hesitate and did not approach. Hui was not sure if they had stiffened, but he knew that his face was a little stiff. Hui said, "Wow, it's still so exciting." That huge hole obviously did not directly hit the innermost area. This kind of microscopic detail was difficult for Feng to grasp. Otherwise, they would not have had to make a trip here personally. Jing Yun recalled the scene where the torrent of light streaked across the space beside them at a close distance, and said thoughtfully, "I think I know why you dared not come after so long." Hui was excited when he heard that. He shouted at Jing Yun's face, "Am I right? Am I right? You think so too, don't you? This is definitely not my fault, right? Little brother's attack is really too." Jing Yun smiled bitterly as she looked at the huge hole. Frightening. Leaving aside the digression, the distance of 10,000 feet was covered in the blink of an eye. When they moved closer to look at the pile of abyssal death fog and manifestations in front of them, they felt even more oppressed. Everywhere they looked, there were giants that were over 10,000 feet in size. They were a mixture of scarlet and black, sparkling clouds, and there were countless non-order energies surging within. Just one or two glances would make one feel oppressed. These guys were really armed to the teeth. If not for the huge hole that had been blasted open, they would not have been able to see the scene inside very clearly. Hui and Jing-Yun operated their energy to prop up an energy barrier and aimed it directly at the huge hole that Feng had blasted open. Just as they were about to rush in, the enemy's fierce counterattack finally arrived. The abyssal death fog that covered the sky and covered the earth, accompanied by manifestations that changed their formations, rushed towards their faces. From the start of the battle, they had used a suicidal tactic. The allies were in front, while the manifestations behind were responsible for gathering a huge attack and blasting the allies together with Hui and the others. This kind of suicidal tactic could be used to deal with some ordinary high-level origins, but it was too difficult to stop the two of them. Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Don't block the way! Hui propped up the order barrier that was covered with golden lightning and rushed forward. All the attacks and manifestations that landed on the barrier dissipated into clouds without a sound, like a golden meteor cutting through the clouds at night. The dense abyssal death fog and manifestations could not stop the burst of golden light. Jing-Yun raised her head and looked at the golden barrier. After a moment of silence, she said, "Your attack method is also very special." Hui smiled bitterly. "Anyway, I'm just a punching bag, especially when I'm only carrying a shield." He composed himself and looked around at the abyssal death fog that had used all kinds of methods to stop them from moving forward, but to no avail. The abyssal death fog around here seems to be a little different. The abyssal death fog in this area is different. They're all special versions of cannon fodder that have been strengthened by the energy source. Jing-Yun said and shrugged. Cannon fodder that had been strengthened were still cannon fodder. This would not change. Hui raised his head and looked at the black tide that had drowned them. He waved his hand and made the order barrier tremble slightly. Countless golden lightning jumped and swept away the abyssal death fog nearby. Taking advantage of this moment, he hurriedly said, "Where's the energy source? Maple's opening is a little shallow. I can't find the right direction. Just go straight ahead." Jing-Yun also took some time to deal with the approaching manifestations and abyssal death fog. She raised her finger and pointed straight ahead. "Just charge forward. The energy source is right behind that thick barrier." 2 minutes have passed. "Do you want me to add another shot?" A voice suddenly sounded in Hui and Jing-Yun's souls. Just listening to the content made their scalps tingle. They hurriedly shouted in unison, "F*CK, don't do anything rash. You'll really die." Yin Nuashing spread her hands. "All right, I just saw that you were surrounded and seemed unable to move an inch, so I thought, no, there's really no need. Maple, save your energy for small cannon fodder. Just give us 2 more minutes." Oh, a simple sentence made Hui and Jing-Yun seem like they had been injected with chicken blood. They were too lazy to calculate their energy or anything like that. They started a massacre and charged forward with all their might. These layers of barriers were already very difficult to stop the two of them. With this, it was even more difficult to stop them. In front of the two of them who were going all out, the barriers were as fragile as paper. The tide-like abyssal death fog and manifestations were basically unable to do much as they were torn into pieces by the chaotic energy of the two of them. When the entire abyssal death fog was bombarding the domain, Yin Nuashing took the time to look at the two of them who were charging forward fiercely behind the barrier of the energy source. She could not help but grin and laugh softly. "I'm not a devil. I just said a word and you guys got so anxious." Hearing that, the little angel could not help but say, from their point of view, falling under the bombardment of friendly fire is not much better than being reaped by the devil. So, you're about the same as the devil. Yin Nuashing, who was laughing, just now froze. She thought for a moment and stopped talking about it. She continued to cause trouble for the abyssal death fog. 1 minute and 22 seconds later, Hui and Jing-Yun broke through the heavy blockade and plunged into a dark space. They plunged directly into the active abyssal death fog. The rolling clouds and scarlet lightning flashed violently in front of their eyes. Now that they had drilled into the enemy's stomach, it was easy to see that they were still twitching a little. Even if 1/5 of them could move, it was the kind that could barely move. They obviously still could not fully control themselves. They did not know if it was the after effect of the influence of the will, or that they actually could not completely break free from the shackles of the strong will. What a strong aura. Jingyan frowned and waved her hand in front of her. Her eyes flashed slightly. I seem to be able to feel the aura of the will that little brother is talking about. It has faded a lot from the top to the bottom, but there's still some traces left. You can actually feel it? Hui was taken aback. He held his breath and tried to sense it. After a while, he could not feel anything. He almost farted. He shook his head a little awkwardly. I can't feel anything. Oh, because you have not come into contact with the aura of the will, it's normal that you can't feel it. For you, it's completely hidden. But for us who have felt the will, this aura is quite clear. It's just a matter of whether we can recognize it or not. As Jing Yun said, she suddenly frowned again. But the aura of the will, it feels a little weird. I can't tell where it is. Let's not talk about that first. Hui quickly waved his hand and scurried around, pushing the abyssal death shroud that was following them back into the void. Hurry up and tell me where the energy source is. I'm afraid that Feng will fire a shot at us if we delay any longer. Even Jing Yun shuddered at the mention of Hao Ren's shockingly destructive attack. She quickly threw away the unimportant matter and focused her senses. After a moment, she suddenly pointed her finger forward. It's right behind that cloud. There should be a final barrier inside. That has become the core of the abyssal death shroud in this area. We just need to rush in and replace that barrier. You hold the outside. I'll deal with the energy source. Okay. Hui quickly replied and held up the barrier. The two of them rushed forward together. It was only after they flew out that he suddenly remembered something. That's not right. Isn't she asking me to deal with Feng's attack alone? But when he saw Jing Yun's serious expression, well, he was too embarrassed to say it out loud. The order barrier that carried a normal degree of offensive power tore apart the defense of the abyssal death shroud, piercing a huge hole in the black shroud that was flashing wildly in red. When they broke into the final layer of defense, we felt that the violent feeling of the abyssal death shroud was even more obvious. The passage behind them quickly closed as soon as it opened, intending to trap them there. But to be honest, unless all the abyssal death shroud in this area of the void was concentrated to deal with him alone, it would not stop them. Clang! Golden light and circles of golden and red ripples surged out crazily in front of his eyes, making Hui slightly startled. He stretched his hand out of the barrier and poked at the space in front of him. He couldn't help but say, I don't know what I've touched. I've never seen this barrier before. Is it the energy source you mentioned? It should be the defense mechanism of the energy source itself. But it may be a little more complicated after being occupied by the abyssal death shroud. Jing Yun quickly went forward and pressed her hand on the special barrier that only rippled after it collided with Huey's barrier. A burst of energy leaped out from her fingertip and quickly drew something in the air, something that he could not understand anyway. Then she quickly pressed it on the barrier in front of them. The energy source that has been tainted with the breath of the abyssal death shroud. It's a special model. We can study it. But now we have to get rid of the breath that does not belong to it and restore it to its original purest state. Hui Gang made an O sound. Suddenly, he felt something behind him. Without looking back, he threw the guardian sword out. Suddenly, there was a burst of golden light and golden flames all over the sky. They're going crazy. You done? Hurry up. You're really a little too fast. I thought it would take 2 or 3 minutes. Hui said, TCH, it's just a barrier that can break through instinctive defense. Can it be more difficult to deal with than the forces of chaos? Jing Yun grinned and waved her hand. After a moment, she smiled embarrassedly. The main thing is that I'm a little slow. I'm worried that you'll shoot at me. Hui laughed wantonly and quickly followed him into the barrier of the energy source point. The scene in front of him. Forget it. Let's not care about it first. You go and deal with that gray thing that looks like something. I'm going to set up the defense. Huey's body was overflowing with golden light. 2 guardian shields were placed in front of him. A thick, crystallized barrier spread out with him as the center and instantly replaced the barrier of the energy source. After that, she sank her breath into her dantian and found Maple's soul seed. She shouted, "Maple, fire! Fire at me!" Yin Nuoxing's face stiffened, and a black line instantly drooped down from his forehead. The magic circles that were originally facing in all directions all swooshed forward, and after a moment of delay, billions of energy torrents whizzed past with the light of Genesis. Chapter 1666. What? You're putting on a tragidrama now, aren't you? You're even firing at me. Why don't you just stand there and let me do it again? I'll definitely aim accurately this time. In the domain of the abyssal death shroud, waves of destructive energy caused by void tremors raged in the black clouds. The impact of the order domain had temporarily stopped, and Yin Nuoxing had the magic circle to stand by his side. He did not continue to attack the abyssal death shroud, but there were still scenes of endless energy bursting out one after another. The abyssal death shroud in this void domain had a chain reaction due to the lack of a certain special factor. They could not even stabilize themselves and were disintegrating in the void. Everyone carried the order domain and walked forward steadily in the sky, full of energy flames, and could not help but sigh as they looked at the scene around them. Most of the abyssal death shroud that was born from the energy source would also die when the energy source was destroyed or taken away. Just like every unit under a node's control, they would lose control when the node was lost, unless they could evolve into each unit with independent intelligence or even more souls. At the very least, they would have to be a collection of consciousness of a soul. In the end, the abyssal death shroud uses the energy source, and it's their own fault that they self-destruct when the energy source is taken away. After all, they're just puppets without brains or souls, one-time consumables. Using the energy source to strengthen them to a certain level would naturally cause a chain reaction due to its disappearance. We don't have such worries, Jingyan explained as he looked at the sky full of fireworks. Then he looked back and saw Hui holding his head and smiling. In front of Hui Jun was the young man who was rolling his eyes. It seemed that Hui Jun was being scolded, although he also felt that the fire at me was a little too heroic, and even he felt that he was about to be killed by friendly fire in the void and would dissipate into a ball of light before he could enter his coffin. All right, young man. Hui Jun probably just wanted to set off the atmosphere. He's still attacking, so let him go. Jingyan stepped forward and said. Yin Nuoxing glanced at him, scratched his head, and sighed. You don't know, this guy is very cunning. You never know what kind of shocking words he will say next time. If you don't teach him a lesson now, he will be even more unscrupulous next time. Then you guys can continue. No, let's not care about him. Yin Nuoxing shook her head and glanced at a certain guardian who had been pretending to be stupid. She rolled her eyes and sighed. I'll beat you up again next time. I'll let it go this time. Let's take a look at the current situation. The energy source had already broken free from the control of the abyssal death shroud. The abyssal death shroud and its manifestations that were originally formed by the energy source were also gradually releasing fireworks on their own. It was equivalent to the collapse of an absolute order, causing the abyssal death shroud in this area to rapidly disintegrate. Countless energies exploded out of thin air and dissipated in the void. No one knew how many things they had done with the energy source before this, but the only thing that could be seen was that it was very vast. The scene was so vast that it made one's liver tremble. What's the situation with the energy source? With a wave of her hand, Jingyun took out a crystal sphere wrapped in a transparent barrier. At the center of the crystal sphere was a vortex condensed from faint blue clouds. At the center of the vortex was a glinting white light that resembled a cluster of galactic clouds. But at first glance, she did not quite understand. It's a little like the mouth of spring. The energy gushing out of it all originates from the void, but it's energy that has been processed by its own laws. It feels like a little like a world core. She could see a little of it with a second glance, but only a little. However, a normal world core wouldn't emit laws and order outwards. Only in the aspect of energy would it appear similar. That's why there's a saying that it's an incomplete world core. However, we're still used to calling it an energy source, Jingyan explained. Incomplete world core. Does that mean it's a half-formed world core? That's why it would spew laws and order outwards like a fish spitting out bubbles. However, it has lost its own world, and only the world core remains. These laws and order have lost their roots and drifted away into the void. Yin Nuashing pondered for a moment and roughly understood the origin of this name. However, it was still different from the normal world core. Without a special method to deal with it, the world core and the world itself were connected in a series. If one side died, the other would follow. The time difference in the whole process was no more than 11 seconds. A failed origin world would not have a situation where only one world core was left. They would all return to the void together. From this point of view, the energy source point and the world core had nothing to do with each other. The name was probably just for the sake of understanding in the early stages. Taking the energy source from Jingyin, Yin Nuashing stared at it for a while, but could not see anything too strange. But it was hard to see and understand, and that was strange. There was nothing too special about it. It looked just like a normal, bubbling energy spring. It felt similar to the star spirit spring that he had inexplicably fished up last time. It must be because he could not see through its essence. After looking at it for a while, Yin Nuashing handed it to Jingyin. How to use this thing? Just use normal energy to bind it in the sanctum of origins. We have a small amount of origin energy and origin precepts, so we don't need its energy, order, and precepts. What we want is its own characteristics, which can make the realm of order spread and consolidate faster. But we don't need to suppress that part. It's better than nothing. Jingyin glanced at the abyssal death shroud that was still playing with fireworks. After confirming that they would not need to fight for a while, she took the energy source and walked towards the sanctum of origins. Then I'll go deal with it first. After watching Jingyin walk into the sanctum, Yin Nuashing looked away and frowned as he rubbed his bangs. Hui saw this and quickly came up to him. What's wrong, Phone? Is there a problem with that thing? No, the problem. I didn't find anything wrong with it. It's just that, from my point of view, it feels like something is not right. Should I say it's too normal? Or maybe it's because I think it's too normal. I keep having the feeling that this thing is not that simple. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly and shook his head. Maybe I'm overthinking. Aside from a layer of grayness on my senses, I don't feel anything wrong. Since the origin energy and the annihilation energy did not feel anything wrong, there should be no problem. Hui rolled his eyes and suddenly clapped his hands. It's a typical feeling of having high expectations and then being disappointed. Probably, Yin Nuashing said. There was no need to fight for the rest of the journey. It was as festive as a festival where silver flowers and fiery trees bloomed all over the sky. Every abyssal death shroud and spawn in the void region before them had all fallen into self-destruction. They had already walked millions of miles, and the destruction and collapse were still happening. The speed at which they passed was probably the same as the speed at which the abyssal death shroud was spreading after losing control of its energy source. Everywhere they went, it was a scene of universal celebration. I thought it would be the same as the speed of the transmission of rules, but it would all crumble in an instant, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Yin Nuashing repeatedly waved his hand to have the thousands of magic circles gather energy, and then threw a thought to stop them whenever he saw the energy flares. How long would this last? He could not help asking. That depends on how much they have done with the energy source over the years. Jingyin looked up into the distance. The spectacular self-destruction had been going on for more than 2 hours, and it certainly looked tragic. Still, when she thought about how the energy source had been occupied for at least millions of years, or at most 20 million years, she suddenly felt that it was not that surprising. An energy source that directly transforms void energy and unleashes rules and order. Let alone millions of years, even a few dozen thousand years would be enough for them to do a lot of things. It would be enough for them to spread tens of millions of worlds and fill an entire void region. If not for the problem with the abyssal death shroud itself, I don't think it would be that easy to take down that energy source. Even 1/5 of it that could move could be surrounded like that. If they were not affected at all, wouldn't they have to attack for a while? I think it would be more likely for them to carry it away. Yin Nuashing turned towards Hui. That thing is mobile. Oh, you're right. Hui slapped his forehead. Since the front line they were advancing on was in a bloodless state, Yin Nuashing thought about it, and once again monitored the situation of the entire Void front line. There was no trouble in other places as well. That 1/5 of the Abyssal Death Shroud that was not moving well could not stop the advance of the Worlds of Order. Apart from them, the advance of other nodes was rather uniform, and they were the only ones who rushed into the depths like a thorn. They had to see how far the energy source affected, and had no choice but to keep chasing. They had also left a teleportation energy mark behind them, and their escape route was unimpeded unless the Chaos Spectres personally blocked their escape route. Then they would just have to accept their fate. It was also because of the Abyssal Death Shroud's near-crippling effect that Yin Nuashing did not continue to think of a conspiracy no matter how smooth things were going. Who would throw out such a scheme to cut off one's own arm first? A trick of self-injury? This was not just flesh, but bone. Judging from the self-destruction along the way, he was sure that this energy source had been toyed with by the death mist of the abyss for many years. If there were no accidents, it would continue to torment it in the future. Therefore, if it was really a conspiracy, then it could only be that it had gone too far. Still, there was nothing to be surprised about. After all, the attack this time was launched because the Abyssal Death Shroud was obviously having problems. If they had arranged 8 million elite troops to guard the front line, they would not have taken the initiative to attack the Abyssal Death Shroud, even if they had nothing better to do. Under such circumstances, there was only one outcome for an early battle, an endless battle, and the defensive line would keep retreating. Lord Maple, there's an unknown energy explosion in the Abyssal Death Shroud. It seems to be the Abyssal Death Shroud's self-destruction. The report that rang in Yin Nuashing's mind snapped him out of it. It seemed that the Abyssal Death Shroud and its spawns that had escaped from the current area had rushed to the front line of the Void where the other nodes were guarding and killed themselves along the way. He guessed that the commotion caused by their self-destruction might have also involved some of his own people. You can think of it as the collapse of the node chain. It started from here. Don't be nervous. Similar information came one after another. Yin Nuashing had no choice but to explain to everyone once before this information was dealt with by them. Maple in front. Look in front. Hui suddenly moved to his side and pointed ahead with a lowered voice. Yin Nuashing looked up, and his pupils contracted slightly. Standing in the void, amidst the dazzling energy explosion that filled the void, a huge black, unknown object was illuminated. It was a half-melted hybrid that looked like a mixture of melted ice cream and vomit before being dyed with a bucket of ink. It was disgusting enough to look at, and it was even steadily emanating the presence of the Abyssal Death Shroud, which made everyone feel even more disgusted. It's that distorted creation. Why would it be brought here? Yin Nuashing's expression turned serious. The distorted creations that they created in the underworld were all formed by the world core of the World of Order through some completely unreasonable means. It was not a good thing, but they could not figure out what it was used for. Speaking of which, it had been quite some time since they last saw that half-melted thing, and they suddenly missed it a little when they saw it again. A distorted creation formed by the distortion of the World of Order, and formed through the constant collision and recombination of the rules. Indeed, its presence is leaning towards the side of chaos. Jingyan nodded as she listened to Yin Nuashing and Hui. But this one looks a little different from what we've seen before. This one's degree of evolution is probably better, and the energy it emanates is more stable. Hui said, and his eyes suddenly flashed, and the corner of his mouth pulled into a strange smile. Now that the Abyssal Death Shroud was not under control, and this thing appeared before them, they could cut into pieces, and then distorted creation. Yin Nuashing murmured, and subconsciously raised her hand, and all the magic circles around her resumed their rotation, and energy gathered. Destroy, destroy. Anyway, they had already destroyed many of these things, and it was not a problem to destroy one more. Hearing his words, Hui suddenly jumped up and hurriedly shouted from the side, Hey, wait a minute, Foam. This is a good opportunity. Yin Nuashing's hand paused, and she looked at Hui, puzzled. What opportunity? Didn't we talk about it when we destroyed these distorted creations in the lower plane? But the place was not good at that time, and no matter what we discussed, we could not implement it. But now, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hui shook his head and threw away all the unnecessary words and went straight to the point. There's a distorted creation in front of us that the underworld has no time to deal with for the time being, and it's right here. Let's do it this way and trap it in a place that is completely isolated from the order and rules of the outside world, and then slowly dismantle it. Maybe we can find out something. I know, not a good guess, but at this time, Yin Nuashing frowned slightly and cast her gaze to the front. Even if we don't talk about the thing itself, it's already very hard to destroy it without attracting their attention. And if we want to bring it over, there's a 70% chance that it will attract the attention of the underworld. What if we're caught by them, and then they come here? At this time, if a person suddenly appears, I think the situation may not be too good, and eliminating the spoils of war is a small matter. About this, don't worry. We gave a thumbs up and grinned. I've explored a little, and there's a way to use the absolute power of order to completely cover it up and make sure that no one in the underworld knows what we're doing and what this distorted creation has become. Don't worry. You can't go wrong if you listen to me. Come, Feng, you first aim at the void in front at the coordinates that I've pointed out for you. Aim at those few places and use the rule destruction to hit them. Later, I'll go and bring it over. Yin Nuashing tilted her head and looked at him. The coordinates shown in the spiritual communication was a completely empty place, and if she threw a torrent of energy at that place, there should be no way to destroy the distorted creation unless the energy torrent was wide enough. That's right, it was just hitting the distorted creation in a circle. What was Hui thinking? Could it be because of the Guardian's perspective? What did he see? Forget it. Let's just hit it first. Although we did not run away, he was still very relieved when he did things properly. Yin Nuashing nodded and waved her hand to let the magic array aim at the few positions where Hui came out from. After a few seconds, tens of thousands of energy torrents were condensed in a focused form and blasted at those few points. In an instant, the torrents penetrated the void, and when they penetrated the void next to the distorted creation, Yin Nuashing suddenly trembled. She obviously came into contact with the feeling of something being destroyed, but she could not see it at all with her eyes. It seemed that some rules were being destroyed, but it was not the same feeling, probably because the rules of the distorted creation itself were being distorted. After the tens of thousands of energy torrents roared, the distorted creation suddenly trembled, and then the dazzling dark light emitted from inside suddenly shrank, and its size suddenly shrank. We took this opportunity to launch an attack, like a comet streaking across the distorted creation the size of a giant planet, and then the distorted creation disappeared in the blink of an eye. Yin Nuashing was stunned for a moment, and the domain next to her trembled, and Huey's figure emerged. Yin Nuashing and Jing Yun both looked at him, and he waved at the two of them, showing a shiny smile of 800 stars, and opened his palm to show the thing in front of them. Look, what is this? Yin Nuashing looked at it, and the thing in his hand was a half-melted ice cream wrapped in a transparent crystal ball. Ah, it was the distorted creation, but it had been shrunk to this size and packaged as an ornament, and looked lifelike. If it was magnified a few million times, it would be the size of the giant planet just now. Jing Yun blinked her eyes, feeling exceptionally surprised as she said, "Is this the barrier of the energy source? You imitated it so quickly?" It's not an imitation, it's the original, and it's exactly the same as the barrier of the energy source. Hui held his arms and raised his head proudly. I used the Guardian's barrier to block it and accidentally analyzed it completely, and then found that it could be used for isolation. Actually, it was used to protect its own cradle, but I used it as an isolation space, and it can isolate most of the void, rules, in order to a large extent. It's the castrated and reduced version of the immune space. Amazing, it can do to this extent the Guardian's authority. Half-half. Hui saw that Feng kept looking at him like he was a maggot and smiled sheepishly, but he still could not suppress the smile on his face. I can clearly see how it spread out its roots and took root in the void. Feng, what you just destroyed was its roots, and then I want to pull it out? Very simple, right? Yin Nuashing. So, what are you going to do with it? Of course, I'm going to blow it up, Hui said matter-of-factly, and then quickly handed the thing in his hand to Jingyun, and then let a more professional person explain it to us. I have no problem with that. Yin Nuashing nodded. Jingyun knew more than them, even if that part of it was washed away by the tide of chaos. You guys are obviously more familiar with this thing. Okay, I know. It needs the knowledge of our era. Jingyun smiled bitterly and shook her head. Then tell me more about this distorted creation. I might be able to deduce something. But to be honest, they did not know much about the distorted creation, and it was estimated that they were not much better than Jingyun. So, they told Jingyun all the information, the result of the deduction, probably the confirmed information, the result of the conjecture, and the phenomena seen. They were all thrown to Jingyun, and were not afraid of confusing him. As Jingyun listened, he fiddled with the crystal ball in his hand, peeling off the shell layer by layer with energy, bit by bit exploring every line, every ray of light, and even a small structure, and then his expression became a little more serious. Yin Nuashing saw that his expression was not right, and gradually became serious, and when she came over, she strengthened the seal of the domain of order. This thing is a bit like the node of the sanctum of origin, but its energy is at the level of chaos, so it should be called a chaos node. Jingyun lowered his head and stared at a part of the thing in the crystal ball, his brows knitted together. This is just a part. The other part, it is like a small sealed world that gathers the abyssal death mist, void energy, rules, and order, a bit like a cradle. It should be trying to breed something in it. Yin Nuashing and Hui were stunned when they heard that, and their expressions became serious. Jingyun continued, if, as you said, this distorted creation is all over the void, they may want to use this small node to set up a huge energy vein in the void. What will happen then? Hui gulped and quickly asked. Jingyun looked at him with a serious expression and said seriously, in the past, the Empyrean god of origin used the sanctum of origin to set up an origin domain that covered the entire void of order. The entire void of order, as long as it was known and discovered, would be filled with the presence of energy strengthened by the origin energy, so that the entire void of order would have the power to resist the void of chaos, the abyssal death mist node that is similar to the origin node, set up all over the void. These two, and the previous speculation, make me have to suspect that, brother, once the underworld and the other's big net is completed, then the void of order's already. Small chance of victory, maybe even. Yin Nuashing slapped his head with a headache. Here it comes again, this kind of terrible news again. How many types of powers do they have under their control? Hui patted him on the shoulder with a pale face. Don't forget, there is still the power of chaos. Yin Nuashing, would kill you not to deliberately remind me at this time. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.